evoke great passion and concern from our diaspora. This has been the topic of many debates, and this session provides a high-level discourse necessary to bring into focus the issues facing the sector. A nation must be able to feed its people. That is understood. That is a given. Furthermore, agriculture has the capacity, properly managed, properly resourced, to re-energize rural communities, create green jobs, and mobilize our youth. That being said, the challenges of climate change, our over-reliance on imported food, resistant strains of plant diseases, the dearth of water, and our perennial drought places food safety squarely in the ambit of policymakers, entrepreneurs, technocrats, our diaspora, and public and private sector leaders, in short, all of us. In this session, we will ventilate issues, programs, and approaches to look at the policies and initiatives of the government of Jamaica for agriculture to support Jamaica's growth agenda, opportunities to increase the production of nostalgic goods and non-traditional products, satisfying the diaspora markets and other markets, and the marketing and investment opportunities for agriculture in Jamaica, the Diaspora Jamaica partnership opportunities for the production of organic food, and last but not least, the looming maelstrom of climate change. At this point, to further create a context, we will share a video. So, Mr. Video Man, will you please play?
Agriculture has always been one of Jamaica's most critical sectors. We look to the land we love for food security, employment, and economic prosperity.
Agriculture is big business. This is the ministry that is going to increase the level of growth in the country, on whom everyone has to rely.
And the sector has been meeting expectations. In 2016, agriculture delivered the largest growth registered by any sector, expanding by 28% in the third quarter of the year as our farmers worked the land to feed the nation. And it was agriculture that fed the 2.2% growth in Jamaica's economy that same quarter. Added to that, agricultural exports grew by almost 20% between January and May 2016. This expansion in agriculture has been fueled by good weather, good partnerships, and a raft of good initiatives, like the Irish potato and onion expansion programs. Under these programs, the government has been providing agricultural grants, technical and marketing support to enable farmers to meet local demand for these crops.
Without RADA, it would be very, very difficult because they form that bridge where you can call to find markets, different ministries, various things that we need.
How are you guys feeling?
Very good.
You guys excited?
Yeah. Excited.
Okay, this way.
Born out of the Jamaica Diaspora Conference, Farm Up Jamaica is breaking new ground, helping to reduce importation by cultivating inactive lands with non-traditional organic crops. Other game changers have been the expansion of agro-processing and the introduction of 9 agro-parks. These underutilized government lands have been specially developed with all the infrastructure and support needed for farming. Agro-parks have produced over 3.5 million kilograms of produce since their inception and provided employment for our farmers. Another successful partnership that has been bearing fruit is Project Grow, the Red Stripe Beer initiative to substitute 40% of imported high maltose corn syrup, HMCS, with locally produced cassava starch in the brewing process by 2020. As the country celebrates the growth of agriculture, it also welcomes more partnerships and investments to expand organic farming. And in the sugar industry, a lot has been achieved under the Sugar Transformation Program, but there's still more work to be done.
We are working intensely with the owners of Long Pond to find new investors to invest in other revenue streams complementary to sugar, such as cogeneration, ethanol, and the production of other biogas for energy.
Jamaica's agricultural sector has a bright future. The land we love is green and the sun shining. Jamaica is laying the groundwork for a successful medical marijuana industry. But with the herb classified as a dangerous drug in many countries, the government is taking a steady, strategic, and responsible approach to the industry.
We are not going to be pushed to make hasty decisions that will compromise the work that has to be done to ensure that we are doing the right thing in dealing with a subject as sensitive as cannabis.
And Jamaica is also dealing with the subject in our international diplomacy.
In Jamaica, cannabis has traditionally been used as a folk medicine, as well as a religious sacrament by our indigenous faith, Rastafari. We contend that the classification of cannabis under the Single Convention is an anomaly, and that the medical value of a substance must be determined by science and evidence-based analysis.
To conduct research on cannabis in Jamaica, a license from the Cannabis Licensing Authority, the CLA, is required. Since its establishment in 2015, the CLA has received over 200 applications for the growing and processing of ganja for medicinal, therapeutic, and research purposes, and has granted over 50 conditional licenses. The CLA is also ready to pilot the Alternative Development Program in 2 communities. This program is aimed at giving traditional ganja farmers and small farmers their place in the medical marijuana industry. As the CLA launches this community project, Jamaican scientist Dr. Henry Lowe is in the final stages of launching his project. Dr. Lowe's United States-based company FlavorCure has developed a marijuana-based drug called Cressorol to treat patients who suffer from a cancer that affects the blood and bone marrow. The Jamaican scientist received a Food and Drug Administration (FDA) award of orphan drug status. It is estimated that annual minimum sales of the drug could be more than $250 million in the United States market alone, setting a strong foundation for Jamaica's medical marijuana industry.
Fantastic video, wasn't it? So that video certainly left us on a high, and we now move into the panel. So to drive this very relevant discourse, we have several very important individuals with their own expertise and well-thought-out perspectives on agriculture to speak to us today. Each speaker will speak for 7 minutes, but our first speaker, Permanent Secretary Sandberg, will speak for 10 minutes, and I will introduce him first. So Mr. Donovan Sandberg is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries. He has held this position since 2006. He is a farmer in his own right, and many of us in the business will tell you that he has a very hands-on approach. So let us welcome Mr. Donovan Sandberg, who will speak to us this afternoon. While he comes up, I must give apologies for the Minister Carl Samuda, who is unavoidably absent this afternoon. But of course, Permanent Secretary Sandberg will speak very well on the topic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the Diaspora, I just want to spend these 10 minutes to highlight the scope and role of the agricultural sector and the ministry in particular, our strategies to position agriculture as a chief driver of growth in the economy, and perhaps a little bit on the opportunities that exist. And where I start with the opportunities, my friend and colleague, Dr. Des Landes, will fill in with some of the more concrete details in terms of investment opportunities. So the agricultural sector, as we speak, contributes 7% to the gross domestic product of Jamaica and employs about 17% of the labor force. Last year, in 2016, the agricultural sector recorded growth of 13% for the year, the calendar year, and is in fact the sector that is responsible for underpinning the growth that was recorded in the entire economy. There is no sector like the agricultural sector in terms of its multiplier effect, because agriculture is indeed and in fact more than food on the table. It is the major stabilizing force in our rural spaces and therefore absolutely critical to rural development. This is something that escapes many people because we tend just to look at agriculture based on its output. But as marginal as we think the majority of our 220,000 farmers are, and sometimes we scoff at them that they don't even know if they're making money and they're very marginal. We don't celebrate the fact that they're marginal, but we want to underline the fact that marginal though they may be, whatever they earn helps with keeping people in the rural spaces and not swelling the list of path beneficiaries, etc., etc. So country people and farmers are poor, they might not earn much, but they are not a burden on the society in terms of our social programs. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, with that kind of background, you would appreciate that any strategy to deal with 5 and 4 in terms of our growth projection, in terms of the imperative now of prosperity, in terms of economic growth in the country and transformation, just could not leave out the agriculture sector. But we have problems, and the problems are largely systemic. One of the problems we have is that based on our history, which we sometimes don't like to talk about, but it's a reality, our history of sugar and slavery have really resulted in the commandeering of our best land for estate crops, and a deliberate and conscious, in my view, subjugation of small farmers, relegating them to the most marginal pieces of land, which are very challenging on hillsides, and so that the majority of our farmers are in fact operating on less than 1 acre of land. The implication of that is that those lands are not irrigable. Our farmers in the main depend on rainfall. And so if you plot the growth of the agricultural sector quarter by quarter on a graph, it will, the shape of the graph will almost exactly mirror the incidences of weather episodes. So that when we have good weather, the graph is going up. When we have bad weather, it always coincides with a reduction in production. Obviously, if agriculture is to make that quantum leap and to make even a greater contribution to economic growth and development, then we have to fix those weaknesses. And one of the ways we have, and the whole matter of climate change is only exacerbating the situation, because we now have more prolonged droughts and more intense and frequent rainfall events. Therefore, we have to invest significantly in irrigation, in land husbandry, terracing, measures to combat erosion, etc., etc., if we're going to make agriculture more sustainable more reliable, and production more predictable. Apart from the rainfall dependence, we also have poor infrastructure in terms of farm roads. We also have a not fully developed quality infrastructure and infrastructure for traceability and so on, which are now becoming more and more critical as we seek to export, and not only for exports, but whatever we consume here in Jamaica, our own consumers are also entitled to safe foods. So, the purpose of the Ministry of Agriculture is to provide that framework to ensure that the potential of the agricultural sector is realized in terms of growth in production and productivity. And in that thrust, the government has a defined role. The government role is not to engage in production and trade. We leave that to the private sector, to people like yourself in the diaspora who might have an interest in investing. But we have to create that enabling framework. And so our energies are focused on doing things that only the government can do. Things which are public goods in nature. And that is why we are focusing heavily on irrigation. That's why we have embarked on what we call the agri-park development. Because you will understand that we cannot produce consistently to serve any market if we have a predominance of small farmers operating on half an acre of land. So what we have done through our agri-park program is to identify private and public lands which are big enough, install in those spaces the requisite infrastructure that will make for sustainable and consistent production, things like roads, irrigation, drainage, and so on. Put those lands in the hands of our farmers and also link the people operating those spaces with the market, whether in tourism or overseas, etc. And saturate the whole thing with quality extension service and research. You have heard the results. I saw it in the video just now. That is something that only the government can do. We also have to bolster our capacity in terms of research to deal with diseases, more productive variety, come up with new varieties of crop and breeds of animals. Extension based on the profile of our farmers is extremely important, because the man with half an acre, you have to bring the technology to him and the advice and know-how. And importantly, we have to invest in our food health and safety infrastructure to ensure that when something goes out from Jamaica into the export market, we can attest to its quality and its safety. So, the last thing I want to say is that the strategies that we're using to grow the sector, and I'm just going to speak broadly, I think Derrick will pick up from where I stop in terms of the concrete opportunity. There are tremendous opportunities in agriculture. First of all, we are importing on a yearly basis nearly 800 million United States dollars worth of food. So there is an enormous opportunity for import substitution. The video you have looked at just now provided two examples of how we have done that in terms of deliberately and consciously supporting our farmers to produce all the Irish potato that we consume in this country. We have taken an onion and we're going to take an additional crop. Because in a sense, every dollar that we save from not importing is a dollar that is invested in a local community, so that our farmers and those who are there don't have to be harassing you for remittance every day. They can earn. And so that the money is circulated in the local economy. Of course, we are sensible enough to know that we cannot produce in Jamaica competitively everything that we import. So we have gone through our import bill. We have identified those crops that we think we can competitively and easily produce in Jamaica without foisting high prices on our consumers. That's one opportunity. Two, the tourism people will tell you how many tourists we have coming to our shores every day. And when you look at the consumption of food in the hotels, a very small percentage is coming from our local farmers. That is a captive market that we must exploit. But getting our hotels to buy more food from our farmers is not something that we can speak into being. We have to put strategies in place to ensure that farmers can produce consistently to supply that market, and that we work out the logistics of getting the produce to the market in the kind of assortments and packaging and so on that the hotel needs it. There exists, ladies and gentlemen, in that regard, enormous opportunities. If you give our farmers land and water, they will farm, but they do not have the skills to take on the logistics and all the post-harvesting work that they have to do to get the produce in the hotels. And that is where the diaspora, for instance, could play a significant role. By going into our Agri Park, where you have a critical mass of producers, and using the facilities that we have put there, like the packing houses and so on, buy from the farmers, package the thing, take it to the hotel, fight with the hoteliers for your money. Well, I hope you don't have to fight. And the farmers can't do that. So therein lies an opportunity. One last word about our traditional crops. Contrary to what people think, our traditional sugar, banana, cocoa, coffee, although production has declined in those areas, but they still hold potential for significant growth and development. The demand for coffee, for instance, and cocoa around the world is significant. Sugar, despite what people think, and I know that this might be controversial, holds significant promise. Perhaps not as a sweetener, but certainly as an agricultural product that can produce energy, be it biomass for ethanol or cogeneration, etc. So we cannot afford to ignore these sectors. And if you look at the statistics, these are the crops that command the significant percentages of our acreage in Jamaica. Frankly speaking, you take out those crops, and they will never ever be replaced. Because anybody in this room tomorrow morning gets up and plants 50 acres of tomato. If you think tomato can replace those crops, then in 6 weeks when those tomatoes come, we have a crisis in terms of a glut in this country. So our approach is not to abandon, but rather to strengthen these crops. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the opportunity, and hopefully after the panel, if you require, we can have a possibility for more interaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pierre Stanbury. I recorded quite a few very, very salient points made, and I look forward to the very robust question and answer. So you've heard the government's position. And you may now ask, what is the role for the diaspora? And we'll now be hearing from a patriot that took matters into his own hands, and I think his story is extremely inspirational. And I speak none other than of Mr. Neil Curtis, who is the CEO of Farm of Jamaica. So Neil Curtis is the air rights, hold on a bit, he's the air rights specialist at Douglas Elliman's Curtis Group, who is making high-rise developments possible in New York City. Although he's very dedicated to the development of New York City's architectural landscape, he has decided to pursue a long-time, heartfelt objective and help tackle the current economic crisis in Jamaica through the revitalization of agriculture through climate-smart organic farming. He recognizes the current issues being faced by Jamaica and its farmers. Even while working on various business ventures in the US, he continually kept the fire burning with an urge to assist in the rebuilding of Jamaica, but he never knew quite how to get this done. In 2013, during the Jamaica Diaspora Conference, Neil met diaspora from the US, UK, and Canada, who shared a common heartfelt concern regarding the underutilized agricultural sector. Together, himself with the diaspora members organized to form Farm Up Jamaica Limited, a non-profit organization with the common good of Jamaica at heart, which would work to help safeguard job and food security in addition to reducing crime through large-scale cultivation of organic produce. Neil has decided to dedicate his energies to fundraising within the Jamaica diaspora, working hands-on with small local farmers and students in order to help remove the stigma associated with farming in Jamaica. Mr. Curtis is diligently helping to ensure that the next wave of growers are environmentally conscious agri-entrepreneurs. By using a measurable and transparent approach to this non-profit effort, there is no doubt that his passion for the betterment of Jamaica will be successful. Let us welcome now Mr. Neil Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Scott. I want to say good afternoon to everyone. I'm thanking everyone for coming out on such a hot day. I guess that's just all the time here in Jamaica, right? But thank you so much for being here. I want to thank Mr. Robert Scott. I want to thank Mr. Sandberg and Dr. Des Landes and Dr. Garvey for actually being here on this panel. And I want to get right into it because I know that time is limited. So I guess we realize as a diaspora, we are going to have to come up with ways to re-engage in Jamaica. I know that, again, we come to the Diaspora Conference, and the idea is for us to collectively come up with solutions to some of the most pressing issues in the country. But I haven't really seen where we have come together at a level that's going to have some significant impacts. And so over the last 3.5 years, 4 years now, I should say, we've been on the ground in Jamaica doing the due diligence to find out what it is or how it is that the diaspora can actually have a measurable impact in Jamaica. Hold a second here. Just go here. Oh, didn't see it. Sorry. So right now, as you may know, there is a logistics hub planned for Jamaica. I don't know that many diaspora know the impact of a logistic hub, but I can tell you that based on the information that I have researched, a logistic hub will create lots of jobs. There will be significant economic growth. It will make Jamaica a prime location to live and do business. Because you have to remember, a lot of these companies that are working inside of logistic hubs that are worldwide already have staff. They already have people and professionals. So those people may have to relocate to Jamaica. They might be here amongst us. Now, the key is Jamaica would be one of a very few amount of logistics hubs that exist worldwide. And I'm thinking that it's going to bring in a barrage of new people. I heard Mr. Leachin say gentrification of Jamaica. And I think that without doing much, just looking at what a logistics hub is, we will have automatic gentrification, right? So that's not a bad thing, because we say out of many, one people, right? And so we're gonna need a lot in order to carry out what we're gonna need to do as diaspora and Jamaicans to take advantage of this whole logistic hub. So if you've noticed, if you need to get to Ocho Rios right now, you can probably get there in 45 minutes. Actually, I do it in 25. No, no, I'm joking. And again, just joking. I do it in 45. But so you look at that picture here and you see the north-south highway. Now, I just want you to take a look at the road and what percentage of the landscape is represented by the road versus the lands that are around it. And sometimes we're looking at, and you know, that's the focal point of everything that's happening now in government, with what we're doing, right? We're going to do logistics hub, we're going to have a north-south highway. But what about all of that land? A lot of it is arable. A lot of it could be used for agriculture to help reduce importation of foreign food into Jamaica, to help increase Jamaican exports, right? Let me just see if I can work this computer here so I can be on the same page. All right. So a lot more land versus infrastructure. We need now to find a way to plug into that, to take advantage of it. There's an untapped potential in land or vacant land that would do very well for something called organic agriculture. Because right now, the United States of America is trying to convert their chemicalized lands into virgin lands. And they are going to be 3 to 4 years behind, because in order for you to do organic agriculture, lands need to be untouched for at least, or not untouched, but farmed organically for at least 4 to 5 years in many cases. So it puts Jamaica in a position that we can launch organic agriculture right now, because we have a lot of dormant, untouched lands. I'm not even talking about lands that are being farmed by farmers right now. Talking about lands like these. Lands that are just laying fallow, that have not been chemicalized or misused. You know, you talk about that north-south highway, and you also talk about economic development, bringing tourists across the country quicker, logistic times being cut down to bring food to market, and a lot more that goes into that. You know, there's improvement in tourism and more hotel rooms, more employment. It's going to save time, beautification of the country, because I'll be honest with you, I love good agricultural land, but to be able to drive on a highway that takes you right through the Orange Walk and be able to see that is almost touristic in itself. Beautification of the country, easier movement of people and goods, like I said earlier, island-wide. But what that brings is more traffic, more tourists, more inhabitants. And it will require more what? Can anybody tell me what is it going to require? More what? All these people, what they're going to need? Food. They're going to need more food. And the more people that come, and the more that we underproduce food, will be the more importation of food. So you're going to have more imports. So instead of the 800 million or 1 billion, as we round it up to, worth of imported food, you can look to see more like a 1.5 or 2 billion US dollars worth of food coming into the country. So, again, we say more food, right? Okay. And more food, again, Jamaica imports over 70% of its food. Lack of opportunities in rural areas make agriculture a great way to rebuild Jamaica from the ground up. Doing it organically brings some prestige to the trade. Our local communities, new members and visitors should have the basic right to good, wholesome food. And if they're coming from other places, they're probably used to having access to organic food already. So we have an obligation, I think, as Diaspora, if we want to fill a gap, let's say, without stepping on any toes, to focus on the production of organic food in Jamaica. Food quality has probably been affected in Jamaica. You know, opinion-wise, based on us being down here on the ground, soil degradation, you know, and just a stigma which is attached to farming, you know. I'll tell you about a real quick story. I have a student that every weekend we go to some of the agriculture schools here in Jamaica and we bring students down. And I had this one student that said to me, Mr. Curtis, I need to be on your program every weekend. So I said, why? She says, I cannot go home on the weekends. I said, why can you go home? She says, because my parents will not accept me in the house because I've chosen to study agriculture. She doesn't want me to infiltrate my sisters and brothers that are still left in the house that may want to become a doctor or a lawyer. And the bottom line is, there's a stigma associated with farming, whether we want to talk about it or not. And we believe that at Farm Up Jamaica, we can help to lift that stigma. We can help to bring people into what we call agro-entrepreneurship. We're not trying to create jobs. We want to create entrepreneurships for young people that are interested in agriculture, whereas they can see a way to buy a car, to own a home, not just to make $6,000 or $7,000 a week, Jamaican. Not enough to pay the bills, right? So we also realize that what we are doing has a micro and a macro economic impact. I want to tell another story, but again, time is limited, and we're going to move on. Good old organic food. Now I say good old organic food. Why? Because the techniques used to do organic food are not anything new. They are agriculture practices that used to be carried out by your grandfather or your great-grandfather. It's all about using manures, using mulching, using the old systems. There's a few things that you can do, like you can't burn land, and I can't tell you everything on the podium, but bottom line is there are very, very, very measurable ways to do organic agriculture. Now, some people say it's backyard farming, but in America, they have a store called Whole Foods. Does anybody know Whole Foods? Right? Okay. You think that the food that's in Whole Food was produced in a backyard? No, right? Okay. So that means that there is a commercial arm of production that makes organic food. And we as Jamaicans, because we have this virgin land, should be focused in on that movement of the organic people and commercializing organic here in Jamaica and exporting organic to America. Because I don't know if you know, but $43 billion worth of food is being sold in America right now. And I think it's higher than that. This might be an old statistic. 90% of that $43 billion is produced outside of the United States. So the US only produces 10% of the organic food that they consume. The other 90%, Jamaica does not represent not even 1%. We're not producing organic food for a market that really could change the landscape of Jamaica and not require us to grow as much food, but get a premium for the food that we will grow. As you see, you know, the numbers are, once people go organic, they don't go back. So it's not a fad. It's something that's here to stay, and Jamaica needs to jump on board. This is what $1 billion looks like. So we talk about $1 billion worth of imports. This money, if we can start to grow some of the foods here in Jamaica, we can redistribute that money back into the lands and to people that actually need opportunities, right? $1 billion. I'm trying to work this out. Okay. We have a program called Doing Good While Doing Business. And what it is basically, this is just an example of it. We took students and volunteers down in South Manchester. We had them grow onions. We then took those onions and brought them to market 5 months later, right? They were sold to a local distributor. Those onions ended up in the Jamaican market. Nothing substantial, because again, all that we've been doing for the last 3 years is like test marketing and trying to ramp up for the bigger picture, which is a huge picture, to be honest with you. Right now, we have partnered with the Northern Caribbean University, the Ministry of Agriculture, and bringing on board even Heart Trust to provide us with some of the students and some financing to grow 100 acres of onions to reduce the importation of onions by anywhere between 15 to 20% within the first 2 years. This is a program that every diaspora, you say you want to invest in Jamaica, here's an opportunity to get involved. We talk about wanting to be a part of the solution. You have to do something. We can't just come to conference every other year and voice our concerns without having some type of resolve. So this is really, you know, my presentation is longer than this, but my time is up. And I do want to get that across to you. If you want us, you want to speak to us, I have students that are sitting out in the audience, and they will go ahead and give you some forms that you can become a member. You can become a member of our nonprofit organization, which will also give you an opportunity to invest in our farmers. My name is Neil Curtis. Before I go, I want to bring up one student that wants to tell you her experience with Farm Up Jamaica. Her name is Delia Cole. Delia Cole.
Good afternoon. My name is Delia Cole. I'm the intern farm supervisor for the Farm Up Jamaica team. I find Farm Up Jamaica to be a lifesaver. In other words, opportunity provider for young persons. Farm Up Jamaica gives youth a sense of belonging, to know who we are. What do I mean by this statement is that we know what farming is all about, that farming will take us far. For one, Farm Up Jamaica ensure that all the members of our team would actually have from the seedlings straight to the market. So we know exactly where our food that we are producing will go. It's great to receive funds from the Western Union, from families abroad, right? It's good to receive money. But for me, it's good to get the fish. You should teach me how to fish. So basically, when you send your money, it's better for me to go out and buy some seeds and sow it. So I can probably send you some money next year or so. All right. We, the students, see ourselves as belonging to you, the diaspora. So we see ourselves as you only, we belong to you, the diaspora, right? So you, the diaspora, need to become a part of Farm Up Jamaica. I thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we heard it. There's no surprise why he's such an effective salesman, isn't he? Very well said, very well done. So we got a few important points here, and whereby we see that organic is an opportunity. So from the two presentations, we see a number of things as to what we should do. We want to get some clarity as to perhaps how we can get it done, and we certainly have an expert who is our next presenter. So Dr. Derrick Des Landes, who is the president of the College of Agriculture, Science and Education, CASE. Derrick Des Landes can be considered a thoughtful and dynamic academic who constantly strives to align a pragmatic business mindset with the research-oriented and focused nature of academia in any activity undertaken. Imaginative and driven, with more than 20 years of teaching experience at the University of the West Indies and at the Florida State University, with a similar period in consulting, he has been known to be leading in projects such as the National Irish Potato Production Program and the development of the Agri Park Program. Dr. Des Landes is a graduate of the University of the West Indies of Management Studies, Northwestern University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management, and Florida State University's Business School, and has received numerous scholarships and bursaries throughout his academic life. He's an accomplished lecturer and has taught many courses at the MBA level. He has published and presented papers on foreign direct investment, country branding, destination choice, and destination image, both within the region and internationally. He currently sits on the boards of the Council of Community Colleges of Jamaica, the Sugar Industrial Authority, the Tourism Linkages Network, and the Jamaica Peel Company. On secondment from the University of the West Indies, he has now taken on the task of transforming the College of Agriculture, Science and Education into a vibrant and strong applied research institution to fully support the government of Jamaica's agricultural thrust. So let us welcome Dr. Derrick Des Landes.
Thank you, Robert. And I must say to the Diaspora, thanks for the invitation. I have been presenting for the last 2 or 3, and it's always an enjoyable event. Let me say that the PS said earlier, spoke about the contribution to the GDP of agriculture. Let me share with you though that in 2009, it was 4.98%. So against climate change, 2 massive drought years in the last couple of years, and other sectors within the economy, agriculture has actually grown 40% in real terms in respect of the Jamaican economy. So it is something that is real. I will try to present in a way that will, that is the button thing, Robert. Where is it? Oh. Okay, all right. The presentation will take the following form. I have not put all the data in it deliberately because I wanted for you to understand how we have approached this and where we're coming from. Because effectively what we have been doing in the last maybe 8 or 9 years is looking at agriculture through the prism of a business and clinically assessing and analyzing opportunities, not based on what we think or feel, but hard data. So I'll take just a brief look at competitiveness. We identify some products. And one of the things that we have done is that we have been looking at what are the products that we think have viability in our critical export markets, as well as our domestic market. And of course, I present you with source of information for you to learn a bit more, get more details. We have a lot of details. We have COP data, we have market data, we have a whole bunch of different things. We have market contacts, so we have a lot of information we can provide on demand. So one of the things that we have done to understand the agriculture sector is that we have assessed its competitiveness, especially in relation to the range of crops that Jamaica produces. Jamaica produces 65 different crops. Believe me, we produce a whole lot of crops. Half of them is really not viable in terms of competitiveness. But we have identified what we consider to be our top 25. And we use a method we call, it's called a DRC. It's typically what is used to measure competitiveness among agricultural produce on an international basis, devoid of subsidies and so forth. So it's effectively, we looked at using the DRC method. We identified a list of 25, and, sorry, you're not seeing it. So we start, this is what we have identified, and we have ranked them in terms of the ability of those crops to get into overseas markets and be competitive. So that's the first 10. A few more, next 10. And what you begin to see is that these are the crops that farmers grow on a daily basis. Let me put it another way. Our farmers are not uncompetitive. What they lack in many instances are the kind of things that the PS spoke about. The logistics, the absence of water, the inability to finance the operation. And finance is perhaps the major bugbear of the sector. There are other issues, Peter larceny, to name a few others. But the point we're trying to get across is that Jamaican farmers, Jamaica has the ability to compete in many of these crop areas. And in our discussions and meetings with ourselves and JAMPRO, when we have been to Canada, we have been to the US, we have been to the UK repeatedly, we believe that Jamaica can compete. We study prices. We looked at Jamaica's cost of production data, and we compare constantly. And for us, it's really just a matter of trying to convince the right investors to invest in those critical areas that can move us forward. I give you the other 5, so you get a sense of what we're dealing with. Notice that cantaloupe is not as competitive as some of the other crops that we have on the list. But not the way the DRC works. Those crops below 1 tend to be relatively competitive. Those above 1 would be uncompetitive. So that's how the system works. When it's based on index, so when you assess the competitiveness, it gives you a sense of those crops that we could target for the export market. Now, let's start by looking at some of the crops that we have been targeting for different markets. And we have been very deliberate about what we target for different markets. This is a local market, including tourism. Quite a range, as you can see. And I'm sure people ask questions and we will provide whatever answers you require. All right? The newest one we have added to the list, interestingly, strawberries. Because one of the things that in our assessment of strawberries, we recognize, A, that our farmers are producing strawberries at a cheaper price than it is being imported, 1. 2, imported strawberries has a shelf life of probably 1 day. So the Jamaican farmer, if he's able to produce, and once you get the logistics right, can move that strawberry into hotels at a good price. In fact, we have farmers now in the Blue Mountains that the strawberries does not pass Papine. The demand is that strong, right? And if it does pass Papine, it doesn't go further than New Kingston. So hotels on the North Coast are struggling to get access to strawberries. That's our latest addition. And we have been researching, we have identified the farmers with the type of varieties that we need to grow. So, and we have done a lot of these. You see Irish potatoes on the list. Hotels require roughly 300 acres of production for their yearly demand. So we know what the COP is, we know what they're buying at, And we think that the farmers can quite competitively meet those needs. Significantly, a lot of these items are produced locally. Many of them are imported. For example, bell peppers, and lettuce, especially romaine. So there are opportunities. And our farmers are increasingly, in fact, one of the things that you see now in Jamaica is that qualitatively, Jamaican agriculture produce has improved over the last number of years. In other words, we have gotten qualitatively better. You look at Jamaican potatoes in the market, and you look at the imports from the Netherlands, and it's chalk to cheese. So we're there, quality-wise. We're not there in terms of the volumes that we need to do and the consistency we need to do it at. For the UK, smaller list, because again, we're being very realistic. There are other areas out that we think we can compete in. I mean, yams aren't usually there, but that's probably one of those things that just got left off. But we are competitive with yams. But these are the ones that we have targeted for increased exports. Yeah. So, and we have the data. For example, if we take sweet potatoes, United Kingdom imports 180 million pounds of sweet potatoes last year, of which Jamaica exported 1.5 million. We have had interest. We have had farm distributors who have been to Jamaica, met the farmers, and they like the quality that Jamaica produces. But we have just not been able to get the volume and the sustainability factors right. One of the things we have done in sweet potatoes, for example, is introduce new varieties. Because what we recognize in the UK market and in Europe, the typical Jamaican variety is not what the market is requiring. It requires the American variety, which is orange flesh in nature and tends to be softer. Of course, the Jamaican diaspora prefers the hard yellow belly and yellow and so forth, and that's fine. So what we're actually doing now is we're actually doing both. And my time is up, but I'll just quickly show you the list for the United States. It's a much bigger list. The United States is a much bigger market for us, much bigger opportunities. And because of this, the large number of diaspora elements within the US, there are some generational differences between the UK diaspora and the US diaspora, which I'm sure you probably know better than I. But from a marketing perspective, we actually see a decline in interest in Jamaican traditional products in the UK, as opposed to what we're seeing in the US and Canada. And last but not least, that's Canada. Oh, well, okay. And right, okay, and these are the sources that you can get information from in terms of what are the opportunities. We have the data in terms of the assessment, why we think that they are competitive, why we think we can compete. We have all that data, so feel free to ask questions, and we'll certainly be willing to support whatever requests you make. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Des Landes. Thank you also for staying within time, more or less. We now have another presentation. So we've had the government perspective. We've had the perspective of a diaspora person getting involved and making it happen. We've had a technical presentation for someone who's done a lot of the research. We now have a cardiothoracic surgeon who will speak to us on agriculture. But I think he's coming from certainly a much different and a stronger perspective, and you'll understand why as I speak. So Dr. Julius Garvey is the son, as you'd imagine, of our national hero, the Right Honorable Marcus Garvey, and he spent most of his childhood in Jamaica. Yes, that is in fact worthy of an applause. Indeed. He spent most of his childhood in Jamaica, however, before going to Canada, where he received his undergraduate and medical degrees from McGill University in Montreal. In 1962, Dr. Garvey came to the United States as a resident in surgery at Mount Sinai Medical Center. He later studied thoracic and cardiovascular surgery at the University of Maryland Hospital in Baltimore and returned to New York in 1970. Since then, he has held several appointments at hospitals in New York, and he has also taught at several universities in New York and continued as an associate professor of surgery at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. In 1983, he entered private practice on Long Island, but he continued to contribute, and he has served on several educational and medical missions to Ghana, Senegal, Uganda, Mali, Sierra Leone, Haiti, Ethiopia, and of course, Jamaica. The New York Times says this of Dr. Garvey: in many ways, Dr. Garvey continues along the path of black pride that his father blazed nearly 70 years ago. The decision to become a doctor has grown out of the ideals of his family. My father dedicated his life to the service of people, and the people that he chose were his own race. Dr. Garvey said it was a matter of which service I choose. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome once again Dr. Julius Garvey.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be here and to see so many awake faces. I hope I don't put you to sleep. Dr. Ying has sort of given me the task. I don't know how well you're going to see that slide, but given me the task of dealing somewhat with the mitigation of climate change as part of my presentation. Agriculture is the most important of humanity's productive activities. It is the engine of rural employment and the foundation of sustainable development and a healthy lifestyle. Over the past 60 years, food production, processing, and distribution has been taken out of the hands of small farmers and producers and placed in the hands of global corporate giants such as Cargill, Monsanto, Philip Morris, and Nestle. Monoculture, artificial fertilizers, pesticides, genetically modified organisms, heavily subsidized agribusiness, and unfair global trade rules set by the World Trade Organization have given us industrialization and globalization of our food system. This has led to monoculture farms that put a burden on our groundwater, energy resources, cause disappearance of species, pesticide pollution, and destabilization of the climate. This system endangers the delicate balance between nature and culture that supports our very existence. And you can see it on that slide there. The top one is basically our macroeconomic system, and the square, and then the circle is the ecosystem in which we live, which is the natural environment. And when you have industrial production that simply progresses and grows exponentially, then your macroeconomic system expands out to the limits of the natural system. Environmental macroeconomics focuses on the volume of physical exchanges between the aggregate economy and the natural ecosystem. The fundamental cause of the accelerating destruction of the global ecosystems is simply overproduction and overconsumption, and the systems responsible for same. The economy is an open subsystem of the ecosystem. Just to provide the present world population with the rich world diets of the 20% would require 8 times the present world cropland. That is more than the land area of the planet itself. Similar for energy production, it would have to be 14 times the present level, and current known resources would be exhausted in 18 years. Not sure. Oh, maybe this is it. Is this one? Yeah, that's what I was trying. I don't know, is there anybody at the back there that can help with the slides? This doesn't seem to be working. No? Don't click? All right. I think you just took me back to Canada. Hold on. All right, good. There we go. Okay. So the industrial ethic is one of continuous exponential growth. Should I just say next slide? All right. This brings us to the limits of the ecosystem. The inescapable logic of this is that we belong to a group that is 80% of the world that is never going to be developed. Again, I'm not sure that you can see these slides, but basically what you're finding is overproduction of the industrial system. You have increasing population. There's a line there that is 2000, and then as you see population maximizing, at this point in time, it's about 6 billion. In 2040, it's going to be 10 billion. And pollution increases, industrial production increases. But as the pollution increases, then the fertilization of the soil decreases. And as that decreases, it's harder and harder to get resources, so that your industrial output is also going to decrease. As that decreases, then food per person decreases, and products per person decreases, services decreases, and then your age limit now starts to decrease. So the point is that we're approaching the maximum expansion of our macroeconomic system. And if we continue with the population, with the production and the pollution, we're going to reach a crisis point by 2040. Development has been defined essentially as an increase in business turnover, that is indiscriminate economic growth. The result is inappropriate development in the interests of the rich and those consumers in rich countries. Third world production capacity has therefore been utilized in the interests of the rich, and we are trapped by the priorities of private wealth creation. Clearly, a paradigm shift is needed. Third world land, labor, and capital needs to be devoted to third world needs. Next slide, please. What is needed to change the industrial agricultural paradigm are small, biodiverse organic farms free of chemicals, toxins, and patented seeds, so that we can bypass the corporate food empire. Next slide, please. Agroecology is increasingly recognized as the way forward, capable of increasing productivity goals without depleting the soil and environment and disempowering communities. It is a science that draws on social, biological, and agricultural sciences and integrates them with traditional farmers' knowledge. Next slide, please. It is applying the science of ecology to agricultural systems to develop a structure that does not need external inputs and allows the necessary interaction among species within the system. There is interdependency, genetic diversity, closed mineral cycles, and self-sufficiency. American agriculture is the most inefficient form of farming ever devised by humankind. And this is a quote by Professor Carr in 1985. It uses huge quantities of energy to produce food, transports food over long distances. It plows, losing large quantities of soil to erosion and releasing carbon dioxide. Nutrients are not returned to the soil, which result in soil erosion. It clears trees and monocrops. It poisons the soil with pesticides, herbicides, excess nitrogen, and phosphorus. Organic agriculture is many times more efficient and more productive per hectare. The Amish farmer says tractors are expensive, fuel is expensive. Tractors don't repair themselves, they don't reproduce themselves, and they don't produce manure. So he uses horses if he needs to plow. Putting more carbon back into the ground through increasing the amount of organic matter in the soil enhances soil fertility and offset CO2 emissions. Plants capture carbon through photosynthesis to make their leaves, stems, branches, and root exudates. Every time we plow, we break up the organic matter, releasing carbon into the atmosphere. Tilled fields have lost more than 40% of their original soil organic matter. Strategies used by agroecology are crop rotation, intercropping, crop diversification, cover cropping and mulching, polycultures, organic farming, crop-like livestock mixtures, and agroforestry. Next slide, please. The system provides for its own soil quality, nutrient cycling, fertility, pest regulation, next slide please, plant health, and total plant production. Next slide please. We must feed the soil, next slide again, so that it will feed us. There's a fixed relationship between soil, health, and human prosperity. However, on its own, agroecology as a science and philosophy is not enough to confront climate change. The farmers need to be brought into a like-minded network that includes the consumer, the government, farm and community organizations, and entrepreneurial skills and capital to repair the global food system and its unsustainable practices. Smallholder farmers struggle because of a lack of financing, equipment, seeds, and a lack of a steady market that will pay a fair market price. One can create a platform that guarantees a market for the farmer through a business plan that allows diaspora investors to participate with guaranteed return on investment of 15 or 20%, the farmer getting a fair market price, and the rest going to the entrepreneurial outfit that creates the business model. The creator of the business platform is responsible for education and skills training, the formulation of cooperatives where necessary, transportation and inspection and delivery of quality products on time, insurance and investment in the value-added chain. This market creating innovation model works as a forum of social capitalism that links the farmer, the private investor, business, and government in a common cause, sustainable development. The diaspora will be encouraged to participate in this model, which would include the management of absentee farms, leased to farmers or cooperatives, unused government lands, government and private lands that need to be rehabilitated, large farms that currently monocrop and want to transition to an agroecology model. Healthy soil equates to healthy plants and healthy animals, and thus to healthy people. So a healthy population is the bonus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garvey. Very important and unique perspective that he shared. And I particularly like the phrase where he said, bypassing the corporate food empire. I heard a lot of what resonated with what Neil was saying about organic. So we now move to the question and answer. We need to be very pithy with our response, with our questions. Of course, I'll be asking those who will be responding to come to the microphone here to speak. So who will be the first person? Ah, yes. Could you, although you need no introduction, but can you please say your name?
Diana McIntyre Pike, Country Style Community Tourism Network. The list of things that were shown there, I didn't see the mushroom farming. We're doing serious mushroom farming now in Manchester with a network of women, and they need support. There's a big market for it, especially in tourism. They already have made some headway, but we need them to be recognized. So I just want to know how we can achieve that.
Dr. Des Landes, I'll throw that question to you. So can you respond? There is a demand for it, and also my pizza. But I think you need to respond at the microphone here.
Yeah,
Are you hearing everyone?
We have actually picked up a demand for mushroom, especially a variety called portobello. It is an emerging market. It's still relatively small, so any kind of volume will overwhelm the sector. It's usually bought by the very expensive hotels. So yes, there's an opportunity, and we have seen it. It's on the radar, but it's not yet at a volume that we think we need to put a lot of resources behind it. But we see it, and we see it emerging. But
that's a pity, because it is the network of women. A lot of mushrooms being produced, but they need to sell it, and they need to get more help with the marketing of it.
Right, well, but you have to. I mean, one thing I'm trying to get across is that lots of mushroom is relative.
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
And when you look at the demand compared, to say strawberries or grape, it's minuscule. But the point I'm making is that It's something that's emerging, and we should support it.
Yes, because
and I think I'll interject here, as this is the question and answer,
yes,
and not a discussion section.
Okay, thank you.
But it's a very important point. And a little birdie tells me that Jamper would be interested in hearing a little bit more about that product. Thank you so much for that point. Then I'll take, Bev, I'll take your question, and then we'll move to the line that we have on the other side here.
Thank you. I'm Beverly Johnson. I'm in logistics, and I'm also an importer of Jamaican processed foods coming into the United Kingdom. My questions today is also to Dr. Des Landes, my dear friend. The add value of agriculture. I find that when we have the glut in production, your tomatoes, your mangoes, your bananas, they seem to lie waste on the ground. And we're not doing anything in terms of food processing and to create new added products for the marketplace. So all that goes to waste. What are we doing about that?
If I may quickly respond, we, in 2011, PS, we ran an experiment. We actually collected all the mangoes. And by the way, most mangoes in Jamaica, the majority of mangoes are stringy mangoes. We actually counted the trees. We literally estimated the trees, and we picked up the mangoes, and we convinced True Juice and one other processor to test the mango for its qualities as a processed mango. It wasn't very successful, and we think that perhaps these things have been revisited. But the bigger point that you're making, Bev, is that perhaps the single greatest challenge to Jamaica's agriculture is the absence of the processing side of the business. So you're perfectly right. We do a lot of, we are a fresh market. We don't store very much. We produce and sell. So there's an important opportunity for that middle layer. And in fact, when we did the assessment of the export data, import data, we recognized that some of the changes that we're looking for, some of the import substitution that we're looking to do requires an improvement in the processing side of the business, because we're importing a lot of processed items.
So if I may interject right here, so before we get to the processing, there's the whole issue of post-harvest handling. And I think that's really an important question that was raised. P.S. Sandberg, would you like to make a comment on this? Or perhaps you could use this microphone.
Thank you very much. We have recognized that, in fact, one of the good things about the marriage of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries with Industry and Commerce, I don't know what was in the Prime Minister's head, but certainly what is now happening is a more seamless integration of primary production with processing and so on, because we're now all in the same ministry. The truth is that we have spent a lot of money in installing infrastructure for processing. And we did a survey a couple of years ago that found many of these facilities like white elephants that government invested in over the years. So I'm throwing back the challenge to investors, people in the diaspora, and other people. Farmers do not know how to handle that part of the business. Farmers' job is to produce the primary produce. In our get people with the cash flow to buy the primary produce from the farmers and process it and market it onwards. Farmers can handle that, and that is a gap that I feel that investors, diaspora people, etc., can fill that gap.
Thank you. If you were to really reflect on what you're saying, it's most important. That is an opportunity. The farmers will produce. The business persons who have that business acumen and the know-how can make that difference. Fantastic. So we need to be efficient, yes. Yes, one last comment by...
One piece of data. We import $200 million Jamaican worth of puree for tomatoes,
and about $170 million worth of puree for pineapples, and lime and a whole range of things. So the point is
We don't talk. Point has been made. So, for efficiency, what I'd like to do is to have those 4 questions, and then we'll answer them in block.
Good afternoon.
So please proceed.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anthony Richards, former U.S. so-called resident alien. I have a litany of questions for a litany of problems. First one.
We'll take a litany of 1.
Yeah, okay. All right, first one, agro parks. Who are the beneficiaries of that initiative? Certainly not of a local market, named the Coronation Market. I don't really see nothing from the agro parks there. Everything is GM thing like GM garlics, GM, even GM ginger is there now, and GM onions. I never seen, only one time I've seen our local onions, and it's so small. So like the worst of the worst will bring down the Coronation Market, as a Rastaman brought it there. Secondly, drought mitigation, i.e. rainwater catchment infrastructure for farming locales, because every year you hear the woes of the farmers that, oh, we have drought, we can't find nothing, the government not help us. Third, take notes. Third one is predial larceny. Huge and growing pain for farmers that have retired farmers. A lot of farmers have become dissuaded from the practice and stop farming because they're not making a profit from it. They're planning for the thieves. The fourth one is encouraging deportees to indulge in horticultural landscaping by providing them with apparatus, that is weed whackers and other stuff like lawnmowers, etc., and educating them how to use it. Because Nigeria has engaged in farming machines giveaways to encourage farming to significantly reduce their import bills. And El Salvador, they have the MM13 gangs that came from California and the southern belt of the United States. They've been giving them weed whackers and all that stuff and teaching them how to use the machines to dissuade them from the gang life. You know what I'm saying? Thank you.
I think you made some excellent points, which I know we will answer during the remaining few minutes. Can we have the next 3 questions?
Absolutely. Good evening. My name is Joan Webley. I represent at Level Up Jamaica, which is a broadcast program, as well as Nanook, which is a creative community here in Kingston. My question really stems from the belief I hold, at least, that Jamaica was organic before the rest of the world. We just called it ITAL. Applaud the Farm Up program. I was able to be in Brooklyn recently, in New York, and saw the work that you're doing there. So land redistribution is my first question. My second question, even quicker than the first, is with respect to coffee. I did not hear that mentioned as one of our crops. I may have missed it because I did come into the room a little late. I myself am a farmer. I think that our coffee industry locally is supremely underdeveloped. The market is wide open, and I'm wondering if these are another area that the diaspora can come and play a part. Thank you very much.
Fantastic points. ITAL is great. In the world of organic, ITAL with certification, and you're gone clear. But I know my panel will speak to that. Yes.
Good evening, distinguished panel. My name is Janelle Rayburn, and I am the co-chair for the Jamaica 55 Steering Committee in the UK. So my question and comments will be directed to Dr. Des Landes, as I keenly took interest in your presentation. The first thing that you mentioned was the decline in interest from the UK market. And I can't refute that because you have the facts and I don't, but I would be interested to know where you sourced that from, because, may I suggest, in my humble opinion, that marketing and communication about the products that are available is the issue, and not interest or lack of. If people know about it, they will buy it. I can tell you that. I have anecdotal evidence of friends who have come here who are, from of Irish descent, born in the UK, and they want to take stuff back with them. So that leads into my next question, which is, why is the UK list so short? In the wake of Brexit, there is so much opportunity. We have close to 1 million people within the diaspora, from the diaspora in the UK, and also friends of Jamaica. Jamaica is a massive brand the world over. The UK is the same. we need to capitalize on that. So I want to see that list increased. Coconut should be on that list. Jamaican thyme should be on that list. Noni should be on that list. The list goes on. So I'm going to end there, but thank you very much.
Excellent points. Pretty soon you'll see castor oil on that list. Dr. Nelson.
I'm Karen Nelson, president of the Institute of Caribbean Studies in Washington, D.C. Comment on the sector. We've been trying for the last 5 years to develop a constituency for agriculture in the Caribbean. When we speak to World Bank and IDB officials in Washington, we're told agriculture is not a priority of the Caribbean region, so they don't understand why I keep on killing up myself trying to do this. Mr. Scott, you came to Washington, Neil came to Washington, and I must add also that there is a Jamaica Agriculture Task Force that is headed by Akimo, I'm not sure if she's around, but I want to put that on the table that there are a group of Caribbean and Jamaican people who are really trying to push this issue. So one of the questions that I have then coming out of the work that we've been doing, apart from the issues that Neil raised about stigma, one of the big issues that there's no finance. Access to finance is a real critical issue. There's no finance in terms of the agencies in the region, CDB, IDB, World Bank. It's hard to get them to finance. And so when we were trying to design a project earlier this year, we found access to finance a critical point. So the minister, I'd like to address access to finance for small farmers, including access to insurance, microinsurance. What is happening with providing capital at a cost that they can afford? Number one. Number two, I wanted to find out if there is an oversight in the program design, because I don't see a working group on agriculture and nutraceuticals, even though there's a report out on actionable outcomes. So was that an oversight in the program design? And third piece, just a commentary. I've heard for the second time this notion of the gentrification of Jamaica. I'd like us to kill that before it starts. The word gentrification, for those of us who live in northern climes, means that others are going to come in and take away from the have-nots. We would like to have another word be used to describe the improvement, the evolution, the inclusive prosperity, but gentrification is not a word that most of us in diaspora find a very helpful word to encourage us to believe that the Jamaica we're trying to invest in will be a Jamaica that promotes inclusive prosperity for all and not for those who are currently at the top. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Well said. But I have a bone to pick with her to chat out my business. I didn't want nobody to know I was in Washington last year, but nonetheless, we'll now ask our panelists individually to respond to those questions that were posed, but I'm asking them to be very succinct in their response. And I think I'll go start. Neil, your microphone is already on. So you respond quickly, then Dr. Des Landes, Pierre Stanbury, and then Dr. Garvey. And then we'll call it an evening.
Well, I think the first question from the gentleman that I can address was regarding the pretty larceny and the need for tools for small farmers and people that don't have access to the necessary tools, again, to get the work carried out. First and foremost, pretty larceny, I believe, is something that has to be addressed, but I think as we increase the production of food, then it doesn't become such a commodity to a thief. Because if you have a lot of bananas in the market, then there's no real reason to steal bananas, because it probably wouldn't carry the price or wouldn't have the demand that would drive a thief to actually go out and do it. So I think, again, increase of production will help to minimize the theft of goods that are out in the market. You know, people are stealing mostly livestock, is what I understand. And again, we're importing a lot of meat into the country, especially goat meat. And so I guess, again, you have that area where there's that place where people are finding that the local goat is something that is a commodity. So they're going to steal that. They're going to move it. I also believe that the, you know, at Farm Up Jamaica, we put together some systems that monitor the theft. We can monitor and track a pretty larcener for up to 5 miles after they have committed the crime. But that's something that has to be expanded. We've only tested it, but we haven't taken it to a commercial level. And there are ways that we can make an investment become more secure.
Well, Neil, thank you so much for that.
Regarding that.
I know we want to hear more, but our time is up. So,
right, so
I'm going to ask again for a very tight response from our other presenters.
Okay, so go ahead.
So I now move to Dr. Des Landes. My apologies, but I'm under the gun for time here.
Before you move on, just to talk about the gentrification. And I, again, mention gentrification simply because it is a word that is being used right now as it relates to the logistic hub. Now, if we in this room sit back and don't do anything about it, in other words, we don't come up with a solution to invest. We don't come up and come together as a diaspora organization or a diaspora should do. Then yes, you will come here years from now and this place will be gentrified. Now, that's the reality of it. You have the opportunity to get on board now and take your diaspora dollars and put them to good use on the land. But we can't be a talk shop and expect that things are going to change. So it is important that we all do our part.
Fantastic. Nature abhors a vacuum. If we don't do it, somebody else will do it. Dr. Des Landes?
Let me quickly respond to just the issue raised in respect of the UK diaspora. And just share some brief facts. The export to the UK has been in sharp decline over the past decade. That's fact. Why is it declining? One thing that we have discovered, and in fact, since 2012, we have been visiting the UK regularly, not just to sightsee and to go to Olympics, but we have actually been collecting data. And we find that there's an issue of price, and we are seeing where diaspora are actually moving to alternate products because of the comparative price of the Jamaican product. We're also seeing, for example, the third and fourth generation identify themselves not necessarily as Jamaican per se, but of British with Jamaican roots. There are subtle changes, and those changes are playing out in terms of the demand that we're seeing for Jamaican products. Now, clearly, marketing is a challenge. One of the things that we're actually doing is saying, okay, recognizing the strength of the Jamaican brand, we're trying to now leverage Jamaican brand to the other British nationals. But at the same time, when we present them with Jamaican potatoes, and they are used to a particular potato from the United States, which they regard as potatoes, and they regard what we have as yam, I mean, the kind of resources you need to change that perception, right, is quite large. What we have done is to say to those members, we can produce yellow variety and the orange varieties as well. It's a Jamaican product. So you still get the Jamaican brand, but it's a product that they're used to and that they're willing to purchase. I mean, there are lots of different issues that we can get into, but you see, but the point I'm making is that this is not anecdotal for us. We have actually been doing research and trying to understand what it is that is driving the shifts, right? We don't see the same issue in Canada, and we don't see the same issue in North America, right? And yet, if you look at, for example, the diaspora estimate of numbers for the UK and the US is not very different. It's not that different. But in terms of the export performance from Jamaica, I mean, it's like night and day. There's one other point I just wish to make in terms of Brexit. To be frank, one of the challenges that we face with the EU is that the UK, having adopted EU regulations, has made it challenging for many of our farmers to compete. So a lot of the products you talk about, it's a challenge for us to compete. Right? Mangoes out of Kenya, we have to try to go with branding, but we can't compete on price. So there are some products that we recognize here that yes, they're nice to talk about, but they're not competitive at this point, and something we're working to solve. But I just make one last point. We intend to engage Brexit. We have started discussions with some distributors. What does it mean? If you take UK out of Europe, what does it mean for the EU regulations that has been a little bit problematic for us? Let me give one example. We normally export yams. The diaspora want red dirt on the yam. No, hold on. Follow my logic. This is not anecdotal. They want red dirt. When we met with the EU regulators, they made it very, very clear to us, unless you adhere to EU policy for ensuring that not one speck of dirt comes out yam into the UK, they'll shut it down. This is not anecdotal. This is not hearsay. This is what your regulators are telling us. Okay? But we don't want to get that. It's not a debate. But we can have a discussion at some other point.
Thank you, Dr. Des Landes. Hold on. And I recognize two persons which we're going to want to take just the question at that point, maybe right after we hear from Dr. Garvey. Dr. Garvey, can I hear your point? And then we hear what Dr. Sandberg has to say. P.S. Sandberg.
There we go. I think, those of us in the diaspora know our diaspora markets. And I get that information from the young lady from Great Britain. We feel the same way in the United States, and I know also Canada. And I think we have done our research. I think what we need to do is not so much to compare notes, but to get together with the expertise here and the research that has been done here, and the market outlook in terms of what the farmers have and what they are producing, and then what needs to be agro-processed. We need to have intimate information about that so that we can then invest and use our resources in the most beneficial way, and certainly in the way that would have the least risk and the greatest return on investment. So I think there needs to be a significant collaboration in terms of what we're doing here. I'm part of Farm of Jamaica, and O'Neill feels the same way. And we really need to get together with you, Dr. Des Landes, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture, to really work out these things in terms of specifics and where we're going to put our money first, second, third, and fourth, and also our expertise.
Thank you, Dr. Garvey. So what I'm hearing from you is take a strategic approach. Okay, P.S. Sandberg? I think I may invite you to the mic once more.
Thank you very much. I just want to address the two issues relating to agri-parks, who are the beneficiaries, and land redistribution, because they are in fact connected. The truth is that through the agri-parks program, we have been able to, I don't want to use the word commandeer, but put in one agency perhaps nearly 20,000 acres of good government lands, and we have started to put infrastructure on these lands and lease these land to farmers who would not otherwise have access to land. I think the sum total of the lands we have already put into the agri-parks would be about 3,000 or 4,000. What is required is the financing to engage all of those land in a similar way in terms of putting in infrastructure. That is in fact a form of land reform, because giving a farmer land without irrigation don't make any sense. And so we are taking small steps in that direction to put lands into people's hands.
All right, thank you. I hear that I have to wrap up, so my apologies for those persons who have in fact been standing for some time. But I just want to recap a few important points. P.S. Sandberg mentioned that rainfall mirrors production, or the other way, production mirrors rainfall. So there is an issue that we need to work with. Climate change is in fact real. There are infrastructural issues. And we therefore must find the necessary investment and the intervention that we need to do. And we also had a discussion from Neil, that organic is a huge opportunity. We saw a slide of what $1 billion looks like. That's the closest I've ever come to $1 billion. That's very, very useful. And Dr. Des Landes spoke about Jamaica producing 65 crops, many of which are not in fact viable. But he went through in a very methodical way, showing some of those products that are in fact viable. And we noticed that there's a huge demand for mangoes. And there are issues. And matter of fact, who wins in business? Persons who win in business are those persons who are able to solve the problems. So if we're taking a problem-solving approach, we can certainly address many of that. And of course, Dr. Garvey, I won't forget this, is that we must organize to bypass the corporate food empire. We are being overrun by GMO. I cannot tell when last I found a garlic that was made in Jamaica. And what the retailers are doing now, they are tearing up the packages that are made in China and putting them in the boxes so it looks as if it is Jamaican product. Don't be fooled. But nature abhors a vacuum. If we not going to make the money, somebody else is trying to make the money. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a wonderful opportunity being your moderator here today. And I want to recognize that the shuttle buses to the Pegasus Hotel will depart at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and 6:30. And if the sessions go after 6:30, there will in fact be other arrangements made. But let's try and catch the buses, so that we can not miss out on the activities. At this point, I hand control to Professor Ying for his closing remarks, and then we will depart for the other sessions. Over to you, sir.
Good morning. I want to tell them about the day of service. Come right to it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know we're out of time. I'll be very brief. Thanks for the excellent presentations, all speakers. As you know, Thursday is Day of Service, and the Agriculture Task Force invites you to join us. We're actually doing a tour of organic farms. You can see some of what Neil described in his presentation. We will leave Pegasus at 9 a.m. It's a free tour. Join us, see what farmers are experiencing, and see in real time what you heard today in this session. Thank you, everyone. 9 a.m. Thursday, July 27th at the Pegasus Hotel. The shuttle leaves at 9 a.m. Thursday, July 27th. It's part of a full range of Day of Service activities on Thursday. No sign-up required. It's a tour of several farms, so we'll be going around the island. So we don't have time to go into all of them right now. You can email me, kimongooden@gmail.com, or call me 408-406-8775 times short. But if you're interested, please join us at the Pegasus at 9, and that's when the bus will leave. Kimone Gooden, KIMONE, GOODEN @gmail.com.
Here with me is Mrs. Tanisha Westcar. She's a 2017 recipient of the Governor General's Achievement Awards, Diaspora. Congratulations on your award.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
No problem. How have you been enjoying the conference so far?
I've actually found it to be a really, really good conference. I was here in 2015, and I can see the amendments since then, and I can say that the young people especially are very much so engaged in all the different sessions. Yesterday we spoke to encouraging the human capital, so looking at stuff on health, education, and so forth. Today we've looked at investment and the EGC. I really liked Michael Leachin's session earlier today, and also the doctor that spoke, I forget his name. But he was really, really excellent.
Kingsley.
Yes, Kingsley. He was very good, and just talking about, you know, that development and really educating ourselves. So I really, really appreciate the conference so far and the information that they've shared, not just with the young people, but everybody, and connecting all the different sectors together.
And you would have received the Governor General's Award for your work as a member of the Diaspora in terms of Jamaica's development and so on. So on Thursday is the Diaspora Day of Service. Can you just give us some brief information about what it is that you'll be doing on Thursday?
Yes, I'm very grateful, let me say, to be a part now of the Governor General Achievement Awardees. So thank you very much to Jamaica for recognizing not just my work, but the work of Jamaicans in the diaspora who continue to contribute to nation building back home, but also developing themselves as thought leaders in their diaspora regions. For the Day of Service on Thursday, I'll be a part of the Advocacy, Policy and Leadership Workshop. That will be at UWI, I believe. And that goes from 2 to 5, and that is a youth workshop as well. So it will be the young people raising their voices, showcasing, highlighting the different things that they've worked on in their various regions, but also contributing again to nation building back here in Jamaica, and having the youth voice on areas such as policy, you know, and how we can effect change and be at the position of the leadership table as well.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Westcar, and all the best for the rest of the conference.
Pleasure, thank you.
So the fourth plenary session has just concluded, and it was about opportunities in agriculture. The moderator was Mr. Robert C. Scott, and he's the Vice President of Export and Market Development at JAMPRO. Presenters were Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, Donovan Sandberg. That's the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries. So we invite you to stay with us as we go into the next session, which is about the weed, medicinal marijuana, Jamaica's medicinal marijuana industry.
Welcome to our section on medicinal marijuana. I know that it's coming close to the end of the day, and so some of us probably may be tired. So I promise you that we're going to have tight time management in this session. The speakers have 10 minutes, and I want you to help me to monitor them, right? Because we want to get out of here within time. I'm Wendell Abel, I'm the moderator, and I will introduce the speakers before they come. Could we have the next slide, please? We have a slide. There's a slide. Yes. This is just a little brain teaser. What does that slide read? Very good, because, you know, sometimes when some of us look at that, we see opportunity is what? Nowhere. And if you look closely, it says what? Opportunity is now here. And when we come to conferences like these, some people come and they look through a different frame and they say opportunity is nowhere. And opportunity is like that. Even when it is staring you in the face and it's saying now here, some people are saying nowhere. And so this session, it's plenty of opportunity. The medical marijuana and nutraceutical industries are prime investment opportunities for diaspora members, with estimated earnings projected at US $300 million over the next 3 years. Members of the diaspora are already aware of the possible investment opportunity for the products and have initiated local partnerships. And so in this session, we're going to be showcasing what other opportunities exist and outline specific ways in which all of us, including Jamaicans overseas, can claim a stake in these industries. Opportunity is now here. Now, the first speaker
is Professor Wayne McLaughlin, colleague of mine from the university. He's a career academic who joined the University of the West Indies as a lecturer in molecular biology. He's now professor. Over the years, his research has focused on areas of agricultural, economic, on areas of agricultural and economic and social importance to Jamaica and other developing countries. He's a prolific writer, and his publications total excess of 40 papers in international journals and presentation to scientific journals. He has advanced the frontier of forensic science in Jamaica, undertaken this extensive body of original work while shouldering the weighty responsibilities of heading academic department. He's a Silver Musgrave Medal awardee for science, 2001, Gleaner Honor Award for Science and Technology, 2010, and a Fulbright Fellowship. Let us welcome Wayne as he presents for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Professor Abel has cut me down from 20 to 10, and he was saying 5 in my ears a while ago. I want to welcome you all, and of course, I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to present today. My presentation will be looking at some of the work we have been doing in medicinal cannabis research, and this is basically University of the West Indies. Next slide. Oh, I can go ahead. Good. Oh. The red one, yeah. Good. Good. Right, so most of us here, of course, will know the product. And in Jamaica, we have many different strains, different varieties, and one of the work we have been doing is to actually look at the genetic diversity of what we have available. And so far, we have found that we have a very high diversity of cannabis that is grown in Jamaica, which is good in a sense that once we start looking at developing new strains for specific purposes, then the genetics is available to allow us to do that. And of course, there are many different names given to different strains. We're not so sure if the different names are all one strain. And this is where our research is going, to look at how similar these different strains with the different names are in terms of the genetics. So since 2015, having gotten the order through the Minister of Science and Technology to allow us to cultivate cannabis. So UWI, we started immediately to set up a research institute, of course, which is headed by Professor Archibald McDonald, which is the principal of the university, UWI. And of course, within the faculties, we actually now have a research group co-chaired by our chair here, Professor Wendell Abel, and myself. Some of the areas we have been looking at, of course, these are some of the opportunities and some of the basic research that's required. And public health, of course, is very important. And of course, Prof. Abel here probably will tell you that he has one of the first research grants actually to start that part of the program. The biochemistry, physiology, so this is the basic work that we have to do to understand what this industry will need and how to build the industry. So we're looking at plant chemistry, agronomy research, product development, training and education, testing, standards, of course, and validation of these tests, which is going to be very important if we're going to be making products for medicinal properties. And of course, clinical trials. That is something that we have to look at very urgently. So of course, there are many challenges. And this is basically based on the lack of understanding of the science behind cannabis. And being illegal for many years in many countries, this has basically stymied the amount of work that can be done in terms of the science and clinical evidence. So we really have to know, Jamaica, as you know, has legalized medicinal cannabis. So this is where we're trying to push the research that we can now look at these different strains and use this to develop medicinal products. So again, the challenge is that it's placed alongside heroin and that is what is one of the biggest challenges because it's in Schedule 1, and we hope one day it probably will move to Schedule 2. So the research we have been doing at UWI, looking at the 3 different areas: basic research, applied research, and clinical research. So these are some of the opportunities that we're looking at in terms of getting other companies, individuals, scientists, universities involved. So the basic research, as we have started in terms of the genetics, which is really, really important, and as the bottom line is saying that we really need to look at getting a better understanding of all aspects of cannabis genetics. So there's a wide variation out there, and we really want to narrow down the genetics to the particular clinical application. So with this industry, of course, let me get back. Right, with this industry, of course, the key thing is standardization. So if you're going to make a product, we want to know that the next day, we always have the same plant, the same extracts, having the same consistent in terms of the chemical, THC, CDB, and this is going to be very, very important for such an industry. So when we talk about opportunities, we really need to look at how we can develop such products and get others involved, of course, in developing such products. Right, so characterization, here's some of the work we have been doing, looking at the genetics. As you can see on the left, completely different strain, and on the right, a completely different strain. So the one on the right is purple skunk. Everybody know that name? Right. So these are some of the different things we're looking at, and looking at how we can identify the different strains and put a genetic marker to these strains, because we are seeing that in time to come, each farmer, of course, would want to claim his strain, and again, legal issues, persons stealing X, Y, and Z. So this is where we are going with the genetics, that we can put a identification on each different strain for a different farmer. Right, so just to mention, apart from THC and CDB, other genes are going to be very important in terms like disease resistance, how well the plant can grow, different soil conditions. So this is, again, another area that we're looking at. Just very quickly, genetic profiling is going to be key, as we mentioned. So these are some of the genetic work we have been looking at in terms of different markers. Well, I don't know if I can have a pointer here, but basically we have been identifying certain genetic markers that can be used to identify different strains based on presence of those plants producing THC as opposed to those plants producing CDB, and of course those that are producing a combination, because we know in the medicinal use you're going to need some variations between THC, CDB, CDB alone, THC alone. So this is where we are going. The chemistry is going to be very important in terms of analysis. So we have validated, can you go back? Right, so we have validated different tests that are required. For example, you need to know how much THC you have, how much CDB you have, terpenes, other chemicals. So we have developed and validated different tests that we can profile different plants. And the idea is at the end of the day, we can develop a database of all the different chemotypes or chemical types of cannabis, because that's going to be, again, a key requirement for to develop the industry. Standardization, as I mentioned, is going to be important, and this has to be very key for different patients, because different patients will be at different age, of course, so different concentrations of different levels of cannabinoids is going to be very important to treat different diseases. So this is what we have been looking at, is how we can understand how this thing works. That is going to be key. Right. Synergies between different products, terpenes, cannabinoids, again, are going to be key, because we know it's not just THC alone or CDB alone. Terpenes are important, right? That's what gives the cannabis its smell, that smell. Right? Delivery methods are, again, important. As you know, we are moving away from smoking. So how you deliver the product will be another opportunity in terms of developing different methods. Vaping seem to be, you know, getting big, but things like suppositories, you know, patches, how you get the product into the patient, right? That is again gonna be key. Right? So again, product development has to be important. So this is where we need industries to start looking at how to develop new products using the different types of plants or the cannabinoids that's present. Right? Delivery systems, again, we just went over that a while ago. I'll get to the end. The agronomy is going to be important because we need to look at how we can grow this thing, either outside, in greenhouses, completely indoors. So those are some of the things we need to start to look at. Right? Clinical trials, luckily for Jamaica, again, many countries still prohibit clinical trials, and we do allow clinical trials in Jamaica for medicinal cannabis. So here's an opportunity again to look at new products being developed and to be tested using human subjects, essentially. Right. All right, I can move to the last slide. Right. So these are some of the diseases that some of the work has been done and published. So I need to colon cancer, leukemia, anti-inflammatory agents for pain, anti-tumor, neuroprotection. But here again, just to finish up, we can just go back very quickly. The opportunity, one more slide back. Right, so it's important that the government, researchers, growers, counselors, patients, we all engage to ensure that the authorities understand the positive side of the innovation. And of course, next one. So this is really an opportunity for Jamaica to write in cannabis into modern medical history. And very quickly, this is really slow. All right. Essentially, just to show some of the work I've been doing from going through seed selection, germination stage, right through to maturity, and then extracting what's there and analyzing all the different products and standardizing the products. So I want to acknowledge our students, of course. They are the backbone behind all of this. This is Lindsay in Caritox, which is a lab that is set up to analyze and profile different strains of cannabis, and our master students in toxicology and forensic science. And thank you very much, sir.
Thanks very much. He did it in 10 minutes, right? He deserves another round of applause. And we thank Prof. McLaughlin, who has highlighted the opportunities in research and development. We'll have time towards the end in our Q&A to ask him questions. The next presenter is Hyacinth Cindy Lightburn, who's been the chairman of the Cannabis Licensing Authority since March 2016. The authority is an agency of government mandated to develop a legal, regulated, and sustainable medical ganja and hemp industry. Cindy is an attorney at law and currently a consultant at the firm of Duncox. She was called to the Florida Bar 2000, Jamaican Bar 2006. She's practiced in Florida and as an assistant state attorney before returning to Jamaica. She specializes in commercial litigation matters, defamation, personal injury, and intellectual property litigation. Let's welcome her to the podium.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak very fast because, of course, of the time constraint. So, okay. The first thing is that people need to understand exactly what the CLA is. The CLA is ultimately a regulatory body that is charged with dealing with the ganja and the hemp industry in Jamaica. We are under the Ministry of Industry and Agriculture, and our statute, if you want to say our abilities come from the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act. Our mandate is to create regulations to guide the development of an ordinary legal ganja and hemp industry in Jamaica for the use of the plant and its byproducts by medical, therapeutic, and scientific purposes. You will hear me use those three words often, and the reason we use those three words is that there is a treaty which governs our ability of what we're able to do with ganja. And that treaty specifically says that the way in which we are actually able to deal with ganja is in those three categories. Second is obviously to ensure that the regulations created and activities within the industry are in keeping with Jamaica's international obligations. The international obligations are many, but the primary one, which is of most importance, have to do with the 1961 Single Convention with regard to narcotics. And lastly, to issue licenses, permits, and authorizations for the handling of hemp and ganja. Next slide, please. Oh. Okay, so that you understand exactly where we are currently, over the last year since we started accepting applications, there are 236 applications that have been made. There have been 44 conditional approvals. I'll explain to you exactly what that means in a bit. 2 licenses have been granted and no licenses have yet been issued. Now, just so you understand the distinction between granting and issue, if a person is granted a license but has not yet either paid the security bond or the fees, the license is not issued. So ultimately, for those 2 applicants, that is currently what we are waiting on. In reference to types of licenses, they're basically brought down into 5 categories: cultivating, processing, transport, retail, and research and development. Under all of those are broken down into subcategories. For example, for cultivation, you have tier 1, which is under an acre, 2, 1 to 5, 3, above 5. Processing, above 200 square meters and below 200 square meters. Transport is as it says. With regard to retail, one is the dispensary aspect, which is what most people in North America actually know about. The second one is one that we have termed a herb house. We recognized that somebody who may have to ingest does not want to ingest at home. You may have children, etc. And because smoking in public is illegal, we needed to provide a safe space within which someone was able to consume. And finally is the issue of therapeutic. You're talking about a situation such as spas, etc. And finally, for R&D, that is separated into 2 categories. One is the experimental, and the second is for analytical. Now, the licensing process. The licensing process takes an average per applicant, I'd say about 6 months, and you need to understand why it takes that long. When the paperwork first comes in, there goes through a desk review process. At that point in time, for various reasons, it may be an automatic disqualification. If not, what then happens is that we verify the ownership and the employment details, we obtain banking information and police records. All of those documents, or the particulars in particular with regard to shareholders and directors, are then given to the various agencies of government who have to undertake due diligence. So example, FID, which is a Financial Investigations Division under the Ministry of Finance, PICO, the JCF, etc. So those departments have to then go ahead and do their due diligence, which usually takes an average about 3.5 months. Once someone has passed what we call fit and proper, at that point in time, the committee considers the application, and then a person is then eligible to have the conditional license approved. Now, what we realized is that it was unfair for anyone who was applying to sink money into the ground prior to finding out whether or not they would pass fit and proper. So once conditional approval is granted, we then give the applicant the opportunity to then put the infrastructure into the ground or to purchase, depending on what type of application that they have. And then subsequent to that, we then inspect the system for example, if you're cultivating, it's CCTV, security, fit for premises, etc. And once that happens, then the license is then granted and then subsequently issued. Now, for the diaspora, the question is, what are the key considerations that one must have with regard to entering this industry? First is that there is a requirement that to apply for a license, the company or the applicant must be substantially owned and controlled, which means over 50%. And when I say over 50%, it could be 50.001, by a person ordinarily resident in Jamaica. The definition per the regulations of what an ordinary resident is an individual for the purposes of the license is one who has lived in Jamaica for 3 consecutive years, immediately preceding the date of the application is at least 18 years old. Now, with regard to attractiveness for investment, There are a myriad of business opportunities that are arising as a result of this industry. Well, the first one is the obvious with regard to local and direct investment with regard to just the fact of people entering and doing the industry, meaning those who have applied for the licenses. What we have also seen is a lot of value-added services, consultants, etc., that have come about as a result of the industry. The second one, obviously, Dr. McLaughlin just spoke, had to deal with the issue of clinical trials. You have medical tourism and the value chain in relation to that. We have asked the Ministry of Health to go ahead and give us ethical consideration for the clinical trials so that we are able to make sure that it goes on in a particular manner. Demand push from the provision of medical permits to tourism. Now, whereas in Jamaica, for somebody who lives here, you have to get a recommendation by a doctor, we recognize that in particular if you are coming from overseas, you needed to get what would be your way in order to be able to partake in the industry. So ultimately, you will be able to get a permit while you are here in order to go ahead and partake in the legal cannabis industry. So obviously, that increases the size of the market that you are able to access from just the local market to the overseas tourist market as well. Obviously, through our efforts, we are trying to shift from the illicit trade of the industry, which unfortunately we have a reputation in that regard, to a legal industry. So we're trying to change the global reputation, and there are also the added benefits with regard to the socioeconomic benefits of commercializing ganja. Also create a reputation for value-added medical research, just to highlight further on what Dr. McLaughlin said, and breakthroughs in pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. If you had seen the video earlier, in particular with Dr. Henry Lowe, that's a very good example with regard to that. What are the challenges? One is that obviously, as everyone knows, with regard to ganja in particular, Jamaica has a very high risk profile. That is something that is going to have to change over time. The second issue that we are having at the moment has to do with the banking of the industry. As you know, all banks in Jamaica, in order to be able to send money abroad, they have to have correspondent banking relationships, and primarily it's out of New York. And because ganja is illegal on a federal level, this presents a problem for banks. We have just to let you know what we have been doing, we have spoken to the BOJ, we have spoken to the Bankers Association to try and get a system that will work, because obviously the last thing we would like is a cash-based system. Finally, the issue of adequate and proper land titles. Everybody kind of knows the issue of deadlift. The problem, either A, somebody doesn't left a will, B, a will has not been probated, and even though you have lived on the land for X number of years, unfortunately the question is who actually owns the land. We have been working with the National Land Agency, and also they have the LAMP program in order to try and facilitate people who wish to enter the industry to use that land in that process. So finally, just to say we are committed to a responsible ganja industry, but if you are interested particularly in this industry, I recommend that you go to the website, which is cla.org.jm. On that website, you have all of the information, the application forms, the regulations, as well as terms and conditions and all the things that need to be complied with in order to be able to partake in the industry. So thank you very much.
Thanks again. We're doing very well in terms of time. Thank Cindy for very informative presentation. Our next presenter is Dr. Ellen Campbell Grizzle. She's currently Associate Professor in the College of Health Sciences at the University of Technology here in Jamaica. She's a researcher, behavior change, communication specialist, and registered pharmacist with over 40 years experience in the public and private sector of the pharmaceutical industry. She's previously served as a Dean of the College of Health Sciences, UTEC, between 2011 and 2016, and she's currently the university's focal point on its herbal cannabis enterprise. We invite her to the podium to make her 10 minutes pitch. Thank you very much.
Is this working? Yes. That one? Yes. It's not working. Yeah, it is.
not working. Okay. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Jamaican diaspora, welcome home. Welcome home, man. Good to see you. Good afternoon. Let me just thank the organizers for inviting UTech Jamaica to be a part of this dialogue. And let me take you briefly into the presentation very quickly. Next slide, just give you a bird's eye view of our nursery at UTech Jamaica. We have an experimental plot where cannabis is grown. That plot is operated by Ganja LLC on our behalf. And we also have another investor at UTech here on the panel as well. Mr. Betty is one of our investors as well from Timeless Herbal Care. The next slide. The medical cannabis industry is described as green. Forbes magazine says we're at $6.7 billion US dollars this year. We're going to go to $20.20 billion US dollars in 2021, annual growth rate of 25%. And yet, the pharmaceutical industry is not investing as we would expect them to. And the reasons are this perceived risk, next slide, risk and uncertainty. That's part of the industry in the United States. However, next slide, please. It opens up the opportunity for investors, small, medium, and large investors, to come into the industry, to come to Jamaica, and to invest. The U.S. has problems with scheduling of products. There are problems with what the legislation is going to be going forward. Now that has opened up an opportunity for you to invest in cannabis, medicinal cannabis, engage in research and development on the ministerial order at the moment. We have applied also for CLA permission as well to engage in further in the industry. The geographical location, sun all year round, soil, and we have folks who are very familiar with the growing of cannabis and whose wisdom is not to be discounted. However, they need some help in terms of the technologies and so on to raise it to the next level in terms of medicinal cannabis. And there's the mystique of the Jamaican cannabis, the essences and the active ratios that are unique and uncommon to our cannabis. In terms of UTech, we have been innovating. We really have taken time to study the box, and we are now thinking out of the box within the confines of our regulatory permission. And we are willing to take some calculated risks within those confines. And of course, like all Jamaicans, we have just imagination that knows no bounds. We are very creative and imaginative people. And our potential investors, to share with you, come from all over the world. But of late, we've been getting some second-generation Jamaicans from the United States who really want to come home. Many have made money in the tech industry, and they want to come home and get a piece of the medicinal cannabis industry here. And we've met with them. There are some academics working in huge labs in the United States where sometimes the permission is not there for them to do the research, and they want a little lab where they can come home, tutor some students, and get some work going and earn their patents. And university benefits, they benefit. And also out of the UK, we are getting some queries about Jamaican CDB and the Cayman Islands as well, saying that there is some demand for the Jamaican CDB. And so we have to look into that as well as areas for investment. We have some investors who have been very useful, like Timeless. They want partnerships. They give you scholarships for students. They want to barter technology for, at the end, out of product development, they want a share of that. They want to in terms of help you to build labs, to get benefits in terms of giving us some money to do labs and world-class facilities. Interestingly, we have a partner who has given us a seed-to-sale technology so we can tag from the time it is a seed to when it is being sold, so we can actually have a tracking mechanism in terms of from the time the plant is sown to the time that it is up for sale. Again, another picture of our grow. This is another view, more mature plants. Of course, I couldn't bring any for you. I was not given any permission to do that. No demonstration tools. But I would have liked for you to have a sense of what. But many of you may be familiar with cannabis sativa. And but at UTEC, we do have it under some tight control, and so I didn't get the permission that I wanted to give you some samples. We've been leveraging our strengths. We've been working in terms of our product formulation strengths for the last 40, 50 years. We've been working with pharmacists to build products, to do products. So in the area of medical, nutraceutical, cosmeceutical, and other product formulations, we've been working on that. We have a multidisciplinary approach. So when we sit with our clients, we have the engineers, and we have the health scientists, and we have the nutritionists there, depending on what your need is. And we offer you investments based on your perspective and your pockets. So you can be a small investor, you can be a medium investor, you can be a large investor. Just depends on what your pocket is like. So what have we done? We've signed MOAs with private and local and international partners. And at the beginning of our discussion with them, we really emphasize the need that there must be some give back to the communities that we are going to work with. Many of these communities have already paid the price for this industry to be where it is, and so we really insist that some give back is there in terms of the investment. New products, we're working on some pain management project with some of our investors at this time. And we have also a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, signed with Steeple, one of the larger testing centers in California and the United States. So we use their technology in terms of testing. We have a quick and easy test, 5-minute levels of CDB, THC. Of course, if you want more robust tests, then we are able to do that in the labs across UTEC, or as Dr. McLaughlin is saying, UWI is also able to help you in terms of that sort of testing. We've had 2 medical cannabis integration days, and they've been successful. We are going to go international with that today, every year, and we've started to manufacture what we call eco-friendly accessories to support this herbal cannabis industry that is growing. Please donate. We encourage philanthropy. We want to build labs. We want to set up our research and innovation center. We want to do so many things, and we cannot do it without your support and your donation to the University of Technology, Jamaica. We need lawyers who are experienced in international matters and who can help us with the knotty issues of patent development and all of that. We need international marketers. We offer cultural immersion opportunities to people from abroad, where they come sit in the classroom for a day or two, we take them in the field for another day or two. So you bring us some clients, we talk commission. We really, really, really want to get more people coming to Jamaica for this experience. In terms of lab techs and pharmaceutical techs, we are training some of those, but we are going to definitely need some more of those. And of course, we need clinical research partners. So we are testing at the moment. We are consulting on product registration. It's a strength at the university. We are consulting on business development and medicine prototype development. We are actually engaged with some of our partners in developing some prototypes for them. Our next slide takes us to some of the innovators from our university. You may know them well. These are world-class athletes, started with very research-constrained circumstances, and today they're the best in the world. And so we're inspired by them. We are going to follow their example in terms of how we roll out our business at UTEC in terms of research and development in the area of medical cannabis and herbal medicines. So we are creating this Research and Innovation Center, and we are looking forward to your support. Let me wind up. Next slide, please. Next slide. Right, let me just wind up because there are going to be questions, and I'm anxious to hear them. Just say that at UTEC Jamaica, we are trying to create, and we will create, inspired by the spirit of some of our athletes, we will create a steeple of excellence, quote unquote, in cannabis and herbal medicines research and innovation to earn wealth, achieve sustainability, and enhance national development. I can be reached, and we are open for business, I can be reached at ellen.grizzle@utech.edu.jm. And so you can give me a call also at on my cell phone at the moment, because it's easier to get me on the mobile. So it's 815-5104. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ellen, for that presentation. And you notice she emphasized how she can be reached. She's ready for business. The next presenter is Courtney Betty. Courtney is president and CEO of Timeless Herbal Care International, and he's played a leading role in the deregulation of communications in Jamaica, where he served as senior legal counsel at the Jamaica Fair Trade Commission. He has over 20 years' experience within the legal, regulatory, and business environment. Began his legal career with the Department of Justice in Canada by prosecuting tax, commercial, and civil cases on behalf of the government of Canada. His expertise, he has vast expertise in working with governments and private sector, combined with an in-depth knowledge of emerging markets, and brings tremendous value to Timeless. I know my friend Courtney has a lot to share with us, but he has 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Welcome, sir. Give him a hand.
I'm going to blame it on the clicker, first of all.
Point to the red button above the man head.
Okay, let's see if it's, it is. All right, good afternoon. As Professor Abel has said, you know, up to 25 years of being involved as an attorney in different levels. 4 years ago was kind of interesting. I remember I was at the University of the West Indies having the first conference in medical marijuana. Dickie Crawford was there, and a lot has happened since then. It was interesting because the presentation I gave then and the vision I had, it's not much different from what you're going to hear today. I really think that, you know, as someone who loves Jamaica, and you're here because you love Jamaica as well, I think that one of the key elements that we always has to remember is about vision. And I always begin a lot of my presentation with Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. At the presentation I gave 4 years ago, I also utilized a quote from Marcus Garvey: "A people without a knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without their roots." And the reason it was important that I used that is I felt that this industry was going to explode. But I thought if we exploded and we didn't understand what we're doing and where we're coming from, we're going to make a mess of it. So we look at all the things that have happened in Jamaica. You look at coffee, you look at reggae, that Japan now owns, you look at bauxite, you look at sugar. We've had a lot of great, amazing opportunities. You know, it's interesting, I was reading an article in The Gleaner. They talk about we had some special minerals and all this other stuff, and it's always happening. We keep hearing about all these great things that are happening for Jamaica, but you look at our country right now and you can see that we never did achieve them. Medical marijuana really has the opportunity to be that solution for Jamaica. I strongly believe that, and that's why I've invested the last 4 years of my time in trying to move this industry ahead. And Dean Grizzle mentioned it's predicted to be the largest industry the world has ever seen. Some people say it's going to be bigger than cigarettes and alcohol combined. When you start looking at the pharmaceutical implications, it's going to be a huge industry. And it's happening all over the world. Jamaica is on one level, but if you look at Israel, I visited Israel over the last 2 years, their conferences, they're the world leader. They've got over 100 clinical trials happening in Israel right now that they're testing medical marijuana products. In Ghana, we've just partnered with a group out of Ghana to replicate. The government of Ghana is now looking at implementing medical marijuana. The United States, you've got the states that are there. Australia has moved ahead. They're now conducting clinical trials. Canada is now moving ahead with full legalization next year. So this is an international movement. Where do you tie in? The Diaspora is really about knowledge, experience, and all the other things that you bring. But of course, Jamaica, we're also going to need a little bit of money, and your money remittance will come in handy. It's kind of interesting because we were the first country in the world actually to have a medical marijuana program. Nobody kind of remembers that. In 1984, the laws in Jamaica excluded medical marijuana from the definition of ganja. We took advantage of that through two incredible trailblazers, Dr. Lockhart and Dr. Manley West, who went out, they did a lot of research, and they came up with two products, Canisol and Asmasol, Canisol for glaucoma, and Asmasol for asthma. Now, it's interesting, because if they were in the United States, they'd be sitting on about $2 billion, $3 billion. Now, unfortunately, at the time, they did not have the support of the local environment. So what we've done is timeless. We want to build on the past in terms of the work that's already been done by these great pioneers and others, but we also want to recognize the mistakes that we've made in the past. Special moment for me being an attorney was planting the first legal plant in Jamaica in 102 years with the former Minister of Justice, Mark Golding, who I'd worked along with in trying to shape the legislation for Jamaica. Some of our accomplishments as a company, last week our greenhouse was certified. It's the first quarantine certified facility for growing cannabis in the Caribbean, and we're very proud of that. The University of we're the commercial partners with the University of West Indies. We're the commercial partners with the University of Technology. Our partnership with the University of West Indies we signed 3 years ago. We're the first commercial partner because we actually believe that if you could create an industry that was focused on medical products, then the opportunity for Jamaica is limitless. We're very proud we've created a model working with UTEC and others. We brought on Dr. Lawrence Williams. He's our chief scientist, I think the top scientist in the Caribbean, former head of the Scientific Research Council. We worked along with him, took his 24 years of research to a level where we now have a product which is certified by the Ministry of Health, the guinea hen weed. Many of you may have heard that he got a patent last week in the United States, showing tremendous implications. Very proud of what Dr. Williams has done. Our goal is really about partnership. We want to build partnership. We're partnered with Open Vape, one of the largest companies in the United States. Very proud of our partnership with Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. I was in Hong Kong last week. Dr. Abel would have enjoyed it, where we had over 100 individuals and top researchers in addiction that were gathered in an amazing presentation by Mount Sinai as to how cannabis CBD is now being used to treat heroin addiction in the United States. We're also partnered with the National Black Chamber, which is doing a presentation there on this Saturday. So again, we've built a company on partnership. Our vision for Jamaica, create some really, really good medicine. We have the ability, we've got the researchers, we've got the history, and then to be able to export that to the international marketplace. One of the challenges that I've had, and my challenges I've seen in Jamaica, is this association with ganja and medical marijuana. And so we need an educational program. Everyone thinks of, as soon as you mention medical marijuana, the first thing that comes to mind is a spliff. And this is so far from the truth. If you look at some of the companies in Canada right now, there's about 7 companies that are publicly listed. The highest one is about $1.8 billion. The lowest one is about $300 million. These are companies that are publicly listed. You look at GW Pharmaceuticals in the United States, that's a $2 billion company. So the opportunity for Jamaica is utilizing the universities, Wayne McLaughlin, the great research that's been done, getting investments across the board from people from the diaspora and others, and being able to produce amazing products that are helping to build communities. We've just partnered with the Jamaica Bauxite Institute. We've got about 50,000 acres of bauxite land that's now sitting there that represents a spoil for Jamaica. And we're trying to figure out how can we work with communities, invest in these communities, reclaim that land, grow not only potentially medical marijuana, but also different forms of herbs. So I know that there will be questions, but I really hope that you as the diaspora, you come back and you participate in this. Because otherwise, others are going to be jumping on board, and we have to now not make the mistakes that we've made in the past, reclaim our destiny. And I think medical marijuana is the product that can do that for us. Thank you very much.
Wow, Wayne, great. Sorry, Betty. So let me thank the speakers again. They did it. They delivered on time. And I think they were all very clear and succinct in their presentation. But in listening, I can't help but reflecting on the fact that Israel is world leader, Ghana is getting in the business, Canada, full legalization next year. A question I'll pose, is the window of opportunity closing on us? Opportunity is now here, right? And it's time for us to grasp. At this point in time, we're going to open the floor to questions and answer. How much time do we have, Professor Ying, for Q&As? 20 minutes. So we have a lot of time because we've utilized our time very well. So let me start with you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited and hoping to see how we can certainly form partnerships with everybody up there. I have a question. Last year we had, last November when we had our agriculture conference in Washington, we did a session on Capitol Hill on medical marijuana. So this question is about the big issue, which is the finance and the banking chain. What is happening and how can us in the diaspora, working with your counterparts in the US who are trying to get the federal laws to match up with state laws so you can have trans-state border crossing of the financing? How can we help be the voice for that so we don't further exacerbate the FinTrack and the corresponding banking challenges we already have? Option 2, have you looked at blockchain and alternate financing as a way to go around that problem if we had to do it? How can we be helpful in advancing that? And other folks, I will hopefully catch up with you of how we can partner.
In reference to the first part of your question, it's difficult to know. With the current government of the United States, the laxing of those laws with regard to ganja seem very unlikely based on the rhetoric that has been said in the open space. Jamaican banks, their correspondent banks in New York, those banks are their lifeblood. So until I believe the Jamaican banks need to get together and put their heads together in order to figure out, well, what are our options? And then once they figure out their options, their advocacy is going to come with regard to the Bank of Jamaica, and then further on with the Ministry of Finance to the United States Treasury. That's the primary. In reference to alternative ways of providing financing, one can always provide financing in whatever way you see fit. The problem is the banking of the industry at the end of the day. When a man makes $1, rather than putting it under a mattress, he wants to be able to go ahead and put it in a financial institution. So until the local banks actually reach a consensus with regard to how they themselves are going to manage this industry, unfortunately, all we can do is push them to move forward.
Okay, thanks. You may go ahead. Thank you very much.
Doesn't seem, my name is Nancy George, and I'm a Jamaican. I was born in Canada, but I live in Jamaica. I just was interested in knowing, there's lots being said about marijuana, but this was supposed to also include the hemp industry, and I haven't heard anything about hemp and the advancement of hemp and its industrial possibilities.
We are currently in the process of drafting the regulations for hemp. The reason we had to do this in a very systematic approach is because hemp that is planted too close to ganja breeds the possibility of cross-pollination. So what we thought was the best way to do it was to get the ganja industry up and running. We are currently in the process of seeking advice with regard to the hemp industry, with regard to the sex of the plant, etc., whether or not it has to be done specifically indoors, because unfortunately we live in a small island that has hurricanes. So the possibility of cross-pollination is high. So what I can say is that we're hoping in the next year that the hemp regulations will be out.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Well, one of my questions was asked just now.
Okay.
Although I had a different way of framing it, so I will reframe it. What are the waste products? I'm really interested in agricultural waste and how it's dealt with in Jamaica in general, because it represents an opportunity to combat climate change and to produce additional streams of income for the business owners. And the other one is inclusion. How do you keep and include the small, I mean, what you've mainly talked about is how to construct barriers to entry, which is great for Jamaica against the rest of the world. But in terms of barriers to entry for those small people who don't have the funds to, to put in place the security measures, to apply for all the, to jump through the hoops, how is this industry going to trickle down to the small man, the small farmer who might have a half an acre? So those are the two questions. Agricultural waste, I was assuming maybe that could provide secondary industries in hemp or textiles or energy production or other things. I'm not an expert. But
okay, excellent question.
Okay. I'll start with the waste product. We're hoping that the industry will have zero waste. So we're looking at all aspects of the plant to be used. The leaves, the stems, the roots. Then if there is waste, in a sense, that we hope to look at mulching, using that residual to be put back into the field. So we're looking at all aspects.
In reference to the small farmer aspect, when the interim regulations came online, we did a tour around Jamaica in order to speak to the small farmers. And subsequent to that, what we were able to figure out is that under the United Nations protocol, we are able to do something called an alternative development program. We sought permission from Cabinet. Cabinet had an alternative development program in this circumstance is actually a community monitored effort. The Cabinet has allowed us to have a pilot project with regard to 2 AD programs in the country. We met with most of the representatives of the advocacy groups and small farmer organizations. From them, we came up with a committee that's going to come up with a list of criteria, and ultimately we will be accepting applications to find the 2 best groups that will give us the greatest likelihood of success. The foundation of that AD program is ultimately that a farmer is able to grow a half an acre, enough to go ahead and feed his family, and the product that he grows ultimately goes into the regulated stream. So that is currently being worked upon.
Okay, thanks. Sir? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jay.
Just in response to your question, because I think it is really a critical question for the industry. Our mantra is from sharecroppers to shareholders. And I think it's really critical that we begin to wrap our minds around how these farmers participate in the value-added element of the industry. Because if they don't, they're just going to be sharecroppers. Our partners, for example, in California, Open Vape has an amazing program. And so what they've done is they've worked with individual farmers in California, but they now allow that farmer to have his own brand. So this farmer, his product, his name, etc., is going out. And I think we've got to kind of look at situations in Jamaica. First of all, how do we promote these individual farmers, allow them to develop their own brand, their own products, their own value added, but also critical as these companies begin to come to Jamaica, these farmers need to be shareholders in these companies. Otherwise, we're going to recreate the plantation system.
Sure. Sure, go ahead.
Just what Courtney said is extremely important, but just to add on one other thing. One of the things that I'm very cognizant of is that there is a lot of influx coming into Jamaica of people who want to speak to farmers and ultimately take away their traditional knowledge. And I have implored the local farmers to be very careful, because what they have has a value. What they know has a value. With regard to the branding issue, that has to be an industry-driven process. And I put it to all members of the market that with regard to geographical indicators, the setting up of their own brands, etc., I believe that is also going to be critical in order to ensuring the value of whatever somebody is producing. So if you are somebody who is willing to get into the system, I ask that you join with other people into one, trying to see if Jamaica can get a geographical indicator for ganja, and 2, to educate those farmers with regard to setting up their own brands.
Thank you. Sir?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming and spending time with us. Marlon Hill, attorney in Miami. This question is for Cindy. Michael Lichin was here with us this morning, and he was talking about the drivers and inhibitors of economic growth. One of the inhibitors of growth, in my opinion, on many levels across the spectrum of Jamaica and the diaspora, is our culture, as how we look at things, how we view things. And I think the image of ganja is something that is an inhibitor among our people in terms of, hands-off kind of thing. I would like to know from you, Cindy, how much resources will be dedicated from the CLA or any of the ministries that are affiliated with the CLA in regards to a marketing campaign to educate the Jamaican public, because everyone's looking to Jamaica. We already have a brand without even marketing it, because everyone's looking at that our cannabis has some special magical powers. And it may, right? But from an image standpoint, I think our entire culture needs to be recalibrated, as one of the words used this morning, as to how we view cannabis, ganja, weed, cali weed, whatever the words are. So we need a marketing campaign. Where is this going to come from? Can we get the Parliament to dedicate some resources? Because it's not only connected to the Ministry of Commerce, it's connected to the Ministry of Tourism, it's connected to the Ministry of Youth. And because the delivery method, the state where I come from, they still have a stigma as to the delivery method of smoking and split, like Courtney said, right? There's several types of delivery methods, and it's not just smoking. And there's a lawsuit in the state of Florida fighting to get that back, because they approved medical marijuana and delivery method includes smoking. So could you speak to that, please?
Unfortunately, our marketing budget right now is not that large, and that is primarily because right now we are trying to set up the regulatory system. Until I have a regulatory system that the international community can look at and say that it is foolproof, that has to be my primary focus at the moment. Our marketing and well, I wouldn't necessarily our marketing, I'd say our communications campaign has to do primarily now with the misconception that's happening with regard to ganja in Jamaica. In other words, I think that when the law was initially rolled out, everybody kind of said that weed has been freed up and everybody was happy, and then all of a sudden we had to re-educate people with regard to the separation of what was recreational versus what was medicinal. And so ultimately that is what we have been dealing with at the moment. But I do take your point that in terms of an adequate marketing campaign, we are going to need funds. But unfortunately right now with the list, it's not in the top 5 at the moment.
Okay, thanks very much.
I think, you know, we also have to recognize that Jamaica's brand is actually potentially a problem for us. This association with ganja is our greatest obstacle that we have to deal with. And, you know, when I started in this 4 years ago, I was not fully aware of the medical benefits. And recently, the Minister of Health, he spoke about his views on smoking. I was attending a conference that looked at the development of the human brain for young people under 19 years old. So there are some very serious considerations that we have to balance here in Jamaica. But if we begin to characterize this as a medical industry, following along the path of Dr. Lockhart, Dr. West, and building on those products, that might be one way of starting to change people's perception, where you can actually see real results and products happening in the marketplace.
Okay, thanks. I realize the queue is getting longer. I'm going to close it. And what I'm going to do is just take the questions, we'll note them, and you can sit. It's also polite, so we don't have you standing on your feet for too long, right? So I'm going to zigzag in order. So, sir, you first, and then we come to you, and we end with the gentleman behind you. So you can just note your question quickly, and we'll record it.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shaquille Sayers. I'm from Canada. Well, it's not much of a question, it's more of a statement. I have a vested interest in the cannabis industry. I didn't hear you guys speak about the endocannabinoid system, which it connects to the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system of the brain, which deal with the pain, sensation, and the mood, and all of those type of things, which only cannabis can help those receptors and cure that feeling. I never heard you guys speak about that. I'm just saying that.
Okay, well, thanks very much for pointing that out. I don't know if we have to further comment on it in the interest of time, but we'll note. If we get an opportunity, we'll do that, right? Promise you. But we'll note that if we need to elaborate. Thanks very much. I realize you're a young man. Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating. Next, please.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Ardrey. I'm a principal at Blue Diamond Capital. We're a real estate development company and investors. And so you touched on medical tourism, which is an area that I'm very interested. So I'm wondering if there's any additional comments about the use of medical marijuana in the medical tourism space.
So your question is about medical tourism. We'll come back to that. Okay. Next person, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Marie Kellier. I am the alternate advisory board member for the Midwest USA. I live in Los Angeles. I'm a producer. I wanted to just touch on the whole idea of education, because actually I took out my computer and started working on catching up on my emails, because I really wasn't that interested in this session. But as I heard the information, I realized that I'm also an educator. I do marketing, And so I realized that there is probably a space within this industry where my skills could fit. But the thing about it, I keep hearing the young lady in the middle, I forgot, I can't see your name from here, but you keep referring to it as ganja, right? Whereas the other panelists are referring to it as cannabis. And therein, we're like, we are not even sure, it seems, what our branding is or what we're actually putting out as our product. It's been noted that there's some issues with the word ganja and the perception in Jamaica. So it seems like we need to kind of have a conversation about that as we roll out this pretty new industry that some of us may not warm up to immediately, but may eventually find a place that we could actually get on board.
All right, thanks for that question. It's about education, possible role for educators, the need to brand our product, and to clarify ganja, cannabis. We'll come back to that. Sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Courtney Betty here from Tancor Trade Union. What it is, this thing is a big fish, and we have a liquor boat trying to get a big fish in a liquor boat. That's what is happening here. What is it if we don't know what we're doing, we'll just lose all of this thing? One, the geographical area. Two, the structure, financial structure. We don't control capitalism. It controls us at the moment. And we have to find a way how we can know the country, not the geographical area. So we need a trust fund to do the business, not the banking thing, the trust fund. The government need to set up a trust fund where these people put their fund and the central bank do the transaction thereafter with the international body. That's what we need to do. The next thing and the biggest problem, the small people who carry the brunt of the thing, we're leaving them out. Yes, we need to regulate rules around them. We send that, we draft that thing for, we fix that thing and send it. They should have worked with it, what we have sent. So the small people don't be left out, because if the small people, like who do the trade, it become a culture of them doing it that way. We won't stop this gun for junk trade, and that is the biggest problem. If we don't have peace, we can't have business. And we need to find a way to regulate the thing with them within it, not leaving them out. So these are the biggest problem. We need to sit, I won't take up the whole time. So everybody has
excellent point, sir. Thanks very much. And it's about trust funds versus banking, role of the central bank, small people leaving them out. We'll come to that point. You, and then you, sir, and then that's it.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Abel.
Sure.
Michael Barnett here. As somebody who is familiar with the situation in South Florida and here in Jamaica, I just want to make the contrast that we in Jamaica need to follow the trends that is happening, the dispensaries that are now set up in South Florida. And also we need to include Rastafari, I think, more in the industry here. I would like to know how many Rastafari are on the CLA board, for instance, because Rastafari, without anyone saying it, are responsible for the branding, I would argue, the strong branding that we have in Jamaica. But there seems to be the de-Rasticization of the marijuana industry here. No one wants to speak to it, but I will speak to it. And but it's Rastafari, ironically, who is branding the marijuana here. So I would like to see them incorporated in this discussion. And I'm wondering just how much influence does Rastafari have with the CLA and the granting of licenses, because ironically in South Florida I can speak highly of Dr. Hall, who is a medical Rastafari doctor, has a dispensary and so forth. Rastafari brethren here are struggling to emulate the same thing here in Jamaica. It should be easier here than in South Florida. So I'd like the panel to speak to that.
Thanks for raising those great points. And it's about dispensing, ensuring that we include the Rastafarians and how many of them are in the CLA. The point is, not left out the rest of them, right? We have to make sure we safeguard about. So we'll come back to that. And yours, sir, the last question, and then we will address all of them.
My name is Lyle Young. I teach in Minneapolis, Minnesota for the last 26 years. I've been teaching for 40 years. I'm from Granger, Westmoreland originally, where the great Peter Tosh came from, where he was born. He sang the first song about legalizing marijuana in Jamaica. Let's give him some kudos. Now, my point is, question I should say, are why can't we start a cooperative system to help the small farmers get together and organize themselves? They'll be stronger together. I close by saying there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent questions and point. Thanks a lot. So we will now try to answer these questions. The first one is about medical tourism.
The Act gives, well, the regulations permit, as I indicated before, a tourist to come in and get a permit, as well as to go ahead and partake in the industry. So the opportunities there, in addition to having your own herb house, is obviously the situation of ecotourism, as well as the issue of medical tourism with regard to treatment. So that's the short answer for that one. If I could just address some other issues
Sure, absolutely.
In reference to ganja, that lady was absolutely correct. The reason I actually use that interchangeably is that if you travel around Jamaica and speak to the farmers, they are very clear. They grow ganja. So that is the reason why sometimes, in particular with the CLA, that word is actually used interchangeably. In reference to the gentleman with the Rastafari, two actually Rastafarians sit on our board. One is from the Ethiopia Diaspora. The second one is Ras Ayavi, who's the head of the Westmoreland Ganja Growers Association. So their participation and their commentary is integral to the way in which we operate. Just to add a little bit more about the Rastafari, though, I think it needs to be separated into two issues. There's one which is the commercialization of ganja that is grown by Rastafari, and then there is the issue of sacramental. The CLA does not have a remit for sacramental. That is governed by the Ministry of Justice. So for example, if people are having permits for events, etc., all of that goes to the Ministry of Justice. The gentleman who asked about the cooperative system. Yes, you can apply as a cooperative. The regulations do provide for that. The one restriction with regard to cooperative is that the lands have to be contiguous, which means that they all have to be joined together. You can't have 50 parcels of land all over the country. So we do have people who have applied in a cooperative nature, and that has actually been very economical for them because it is one application form that actually has to come in. Yeah,
the banking issue, trust funds versus banking.
Well, for the trust fund issue, that's an issue for the ministry. What you're saying is that the government should ultimately set up a trust fund. I don't necessarily know, with all of the financial considerations the government has at this moment, whether or not it is able to do so. With regard to the suggestion that was posed, with regard to kind of, I believe, have almost a facility that did, a central facility that did the banking. The problem is that even all financial institutions in Jamaica are ultimately governed by the Bank of Jamaica. So even a credit union banks with a commercial bank who ultimately is governed by the Bank of Jamaica. So therein lies the problem, which is why I say that the banks have to get together to go ahead and solve the problem. I believe that for them, there is a lot of opportunity for them to earn in this industry. And so I do believe that if you want to say, the carrot is in front of them in order to find a workable answer as to how to bank the industry.
Thanks very much. Before you go, Professor Ying wants to make some important announcement, and I have one to remind us that the Faculty of Medical Sciences, UWI, annual research conference is in November this year, 2017, and we'll be looking at cannabis and cannabinoids, opportunities and challenges. Thanks very much for your participation. Thank the panelists. Have a wonderful afternoon. Professor Ying.
Give the panelists a round of. It's not very easy to bring the day to a closure, but I think we had an excellent panel, very informative, very engaging. Give them another round of applause. And let's thank Professor Abel. He was very able in handling the session. Thank you, panelists. Just some announcements. I would like to meet the following persons right after this session. Danica Jones, Yvette Blackburn, Nathaniel Pete, Alison Smith, Corey Hyde, Gillian Wilkins-Mack, and Beverly Johnson. Can't escape Beverly. Just a reminder, the Grace Kennedy Victoria Mutual Oldies Lime will be at the Sunken Gardens at Hope Gardens. The bus leaves the Pegasus at 7 p.m. It leaves the Courtney, the people at the Courtney can just walk across to the Pegasus. And those at Knutsford Court, it's 7:15. Rupert, you have an announcement? What's that? Invitation to Day of Service. That's on Thursday. So we can make this announcement again tomorrow, Rupert. Well, thanks all, and have a good evening. Go out and enjoy yourselves. Be back here at 8:30 in the morning for the creative and cultural industries to kick off today. Now the real discussion starts. Marlon, you two are going to argue.
Thank you very much. No. Yes. There you go.
Professor Neville Ying.
Stock exchange, persons going over there at midday tomorrow. Please remember to connect with us at midday tomorrow.
Of the Jamaica 55 Diaspora Conference. And that session you just heard was Positive Vibrations, a discussion on Jamaica's fledgling medical marijuana industry. And that's how we closed out day 2. I have here with me Seymour Mattis, one of the delegates at this year's conference, and he is a member of the Jamaica Education Task Force in the United Kingdom. Welcome, Mr. Mattis.
Thank you very much.
All right, please tell me a little bit more about the work of the Jamaica Education Task Force in the UK.
Well, Jamaica Education Task Force was set up in 2013 out of the recommendation of the 2013 biennial conference. And we actually set up to provide leverage support for education in Jamaica, holistic education. So we're talking about basic schools, primary school, and high schools, and beyond.
And in those 4 years, tell me, what are some of your notable accomplishments?
Well, basically the first one was to do with Padmore Primary School, where the school was down for closure by the Ministry of Education, and we actually renovated the school to make it safe for the pupils to return to school that particular year. And we've supported them ever since.
The principal of Padmore Primary was here yesterday and spoke about the work that you have been doing in terms of supporting them. What are the plans for the rest of Jamaica's education sector in the near future?
Well, we can start immediately with the Diaspora Day of Service at the Michael College University on the 27th of July,
right,
where we're launching our Creative Futures Jamaica project, or program, if you like. It's much bigger than a project. And this will be it's aimed at actually providing information as well as strategy for teachers to deliver STEM and, if you like, business to their students within their schools. And we start in grade 5. So it goes from grade 5 to high school, 6th form.
All right, so we're streaming live on the internet. For those Jamaicans in the United Kingdom who are watching, tell us how they could get involved in the Jamaica Education Task Force.
Well, we're actually working with particular high schools at the moment, starting with them. And the first 2 we're starting with is with Newell High School and Black River High School in St. Elizabeth. But we aim to actually roll it out to other schools as well. And how the program works is that the primary schools who have grade 5 and 6 students, those feeder schools will actually work with those high schools in particular.